Hold on.
So can you go on your Teams?
Maybe I'm mute here.
Yeah.
Testing, testing,
Yeah.
testing. 1, 2. It's showing here, but it's not. The sound is not coming through. It's in the recording.
Can't hear you from home.
No, I've got it here, and it's not coming through. It's just visible, but it's not coming. Oh, hello. It's working now.
It is
It's working. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much, Lucian. And sorry for anybody who's listening in for that little hiatus. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest.
Yeah.
Any declarations of interest? Okay, Andrew. Andrew?
Just in the interest of transparency, that I'm employed by the Holt School, so I've been sort of advised that that shouldn't, because it's not a financial interest, it shouldn't affect other things, but in transparency.
Thank you. Richard?
I'm a governor at St Paul's Junior School and St Cecilia's, and I'm married to a teacher at the Holt as well.
Thank you, Richard. Phil?
I am a member of the management committee of Foundry College.
Good. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meeting, which was on the 22nd of March. Does anyone who was in attendance at that meeting wish to suggest any amendments to those minutes? I think that's only you and I, Anne. Are you happy with those minutes? Okay. Would you like to propose that they are a true and accurate record of that meeting?
Yes, okay. I propose that the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of March are true and accurate.
Thank you. And I'll second that, and I'll sign the minutes after this meeting. There are just a couple of quick matters arising out of those minutes. Firstly, on page 7, there was a request for information regarding training for homeschool transport drivers and escorts. That was to be left to agenda item 10. I'm going to come back to that at that point. Also on page 7, Lucienne, would you be able to confirm, if not tonight, at a later point with the Mayor's office that the Youth Council presentation to the full council is going ahead in September? It'd be great to welcome the Youth Council. Thank you, Lucienne. Also on page 7 for circulating the education update. This was circulated as requested to all members of the council on the 27th of March. And on page 10, there was a reference to recruitment of social workers. Again, it was an issue that was raised during our training this evening. A report on the recruitment of social workers will be brought to this committee on the 6th of September, and my understanding is that social workers will be invited to participate, including possibly some very recent recruits. So we're looking forward to that. And page 14, it was agreed at that last meeting that updates on the safety valve and SEND strategy refresh will be a standing item on the agenda, and they will be item 13 this evening. Were there any other matters arising? Thank you very much. Item 6, public question time. No public members, questions from members of the public. Any questions from members? No, thank you. So, if we could invite the SEND Youth Forum to join us.
Okay.
Yes. I'll say something. Hello.
That's it.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Ramona Bridgman. I'm a youth participation coordinator at Me Too Club, a local charity. And we set up, and we're funding from Wokingham Borough Council, our Send Youth Forum, which was the first one in Wokingham in January last year. And we were asked to come and talk to you. But I thought rather than me do a lot of spiel, I mean, we've worked with about 30 young people over the course of the last year alone. And we've got some really dedicated young people and we're really proud of them. So I thought rather than me just giving you a spiel, I thought I'd introduce the young people and you'd hear directly from them about what they want to tell you or any questions that they have for counsellors. And can I just say hello to Sophie and to Hugo, who are joining us as well online. Hello. So can I introduce you first of all? So if you just give your names.
Hello, my name's Jack.
My name's Megan.
Hello, my name is Benedict.
You want to introduce yourself, Sophie and Hugo? We also had a young girl of 10 who's a wheelchair user. She's not able to come tonight because she's going to be in hospital tomorrow. But the thing that she most wanted you to know was it's really hard in Wokingham to find playgrounds that are accessible. She's got a twin sister who's able to go on some of the new park equipment, and particularly in Woodley where they live, and she just has to watch because there's nothing accessible for her. So she really wanted you to hear that tonight, that it's so difficult as a young person who's a wheelchair user to find accessible equipment in Wokingham and Woodley.
So and that's Woodley, the Woodford Park, is it?
Yes, the new one in Woodley.
Just open doors. They'll be disappointed to hear that at the council because I think they made a special effort to try and make it accessible, actually. So I'll really have to look into that.
Yes. Well, I think they would like councillors at some point when it's convenient to you to actually shadow some wheelchair users on the buses and maybe come to the parks and see the difficulties firsthand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you. So can I turn to you then?
No. So what I find very important is that you can get your selection of choice of college, in that you get the right sort of education for your needs and for your mental health. Yeah. And so you stay happy. Yeah.
It's really hard, particularly if you've been in a special school, hasn't it, for
Yeah.
a long time, to not know where you're going to be in a year's time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just start out that? Well done, Jack.
Yeah.
I didn't think he'd maybe able to articulate that as well as he did, so well done.
Yeah.
A big step for Jack next year because he's got one more year left at his special school in Addington, and I think the worry for him and for me is that Addington's been so fabulous for him that the next step is very, very important to him. So I felt quite emotional because it's quite a big deal, and also he's gone through quite a lot of stress in his young life because he lost his father suddenly 5.5 years ago. Sorry, I feel sorry. I don't know why I've got emotional. So it's a big step, not just for him, but also for me, because obviously I'm intrinsically linked to him. And so his choice, and because the borough is so big and we hear really scaremongering stories, rightly or wrongly, that because the borough is so big and we live in South Finch, so we're right at the south of the borough, and we increasingly kind of get feedback that, oh, well, you'll just get the choice that's nearest to where you live that can accommodate your needs. And, that fills me with slight dread because Jack's very clear on where he would like to go. And where would you like to go?
BCA.
He would like to go to BCA, which is still within the borough, but it's not necessarily going to be the closest. So, but I know that if he doesn't get that, it will be just absolutely heartbreaking for him. So
and he just young people are in this position where they don't know where they're going to go and they're unsure whether they're going to get a placement that's right for them.
And I think we totally understand, obviously, budgets are all really tight. Everyone really understands that. But I think the message really was that, this is a human being we're talking about. And obviously, where they feel they want to be, it's not just about the right educational setting to progress them with further educational foundation skills and life skills. It's also about the right setting that fits well with them as an individual and a human being. So it's the broader picture, not just because one size does not fit all. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I just interrupt if I may? It's great, Jack, that you're hoping to go to BCA.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Have you visited there yet? Or?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was good.
Absolutely loved it there. It was
Brilliant.
a good environment. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just for the benefit of any members who might not be familiar, can you just tell us what BCA stands for? Is it Berkshire College of Agriculture?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And it's a wonderful place. So best of luck.
Really good support there as well, hasn't it?
Oh, that's exciting.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
Right, so can I turn to you then, Megan?
Hi. I wanted to make everybody aware of the lack of mental health support that is in not just the borough but the whole country in itself. Myself have experienced some significant mental health difficulties about 4 years ago, and I was at a school where they just didn't support me at all, and they sort of just ignored me, and they seemed to just want to isolate me from other people, and they just didn't pick up on any anxiety or anything. One of my head of years said to me that I didn't have anxiety and that I wasn't unwell, I just had anxiety. And that was it still sort of lives with me to this day. And they didn't really pick up on some of the social difficulties that I'd encountered in 2019 at school through to lockdown. They sort of picked up that it could be autism. I'm now diagnosed with autism. But they just didn't want to know. And whenever there was a bad sort of social interaction with another peer, it would just be right, I'm going to put her in isolation. I'm then going to tell that student not to talk to her ever again. And this was my head of year. And it sort of just in the end sort of just led to the whole year group just not wanting to talk to me. So that for me was quite hard. And it was quite a challenging year, not just for me, but also for my family. There's a lot more of it, but I won't go too much into it. I then managed to move schools to Wangels, where the SEND there was absolutely fantastic. She was amazing. She identified that there just like was quite a few difficulties there. And I then got put onto the waiting list for an autism assessment, which was about 2 years under CAM. So that's another thing about how slow like the wait list is for stuff like ADHD, ADD, autism, and yeah, just how slow everything is. Like I just wish that there was just more staff in the NHS that could help people, so that then they can get diagnosed with things quicker and receive the support that they need. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there is. But yeah, no, just that how slow the lack of mental health support is, and how there just needs to just be more staff, and how it just needs to like be a bit more speedy, especially like in crisis, like especially going back to 2019 when I was really suicidal. I sat in A&E, and then to still come out of A&E and then for them to still not say that I had a diagnosis of depression was just like diabolical. It was like, what is this? So yeah, I think like my question is like can you just help a little bit with like the mental health sort of support side of things, and like diagnosing people and the wait lists. Yeah.
Thank you so
Megan,
much,
thank you
Megan.
so much for sharing that, you know, and that is so important. And what you've said is so moving. It's awful that you had that experience at your previous school, but then you said at the later school, the SEND support was fantastic. SEND support has to be fantastic for everybody in every school. And I think that's your message, isn't it? Yeah. Can you tell us why you think that it was not fantastic at the first school? Are there any things that perhaps we could change to help other young people?
So I used to go to Maiden Early School, and they're very like academic, you know, they expect all their students to be getting like A stars, and you know, if you've got a D or whatever, they don't care. And like the inclusion area was quite small. So I think if they had like bigger areas of inclusion areas or like therapeutic things for those younger individuals that have got special educational needs, it would be more beneficial. Yeah, and maybe like even having someone that's trained in mental health, because at Wangels College they had a lady that was trained in mental health, and she was excellent. Yeah, I would just say like there just needs to be like there's more like key staff for those individuals that really need it.
Really important.
Thanks so much, Megan.
There were two girls who were due to come today. They've obviously been delayed, but they wanted to make similar points to Megan about how important it was to have reasonable adjustments made in school. I mean, one of them, just her anxiety, really easily managed by being able to doodle or have a fidget spinner and not being allowed that by a teacher in school, so that your anxiety is heightened. And all the research is that being able to doodle and use fidget aids really helps concentration for those who've got any additional needs. Thank you.
What the message I'm getting from that, and correct me if any of you get a different one, is that it sounds like you didn't have what's called a Senko. That's somebody who is properly trained and responsible for those things. That you had one at Wangels. It sounds like they didn't have one at Maiden. No,
there was one at Maiden Early, and she was like best friends with my head of year, and the daughter of the Senko was also in my school year. So there was just. And she even said to my mum, there's no way you're going to get an EHCP for your daughter. There's no way you're going to get a diagnosis. And I wish I could go back to that school now and be like, excuse me, look what I've got, you know?
true fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to repeat, Megan, we're so sorry that you've had this experience, but the things have got a little better, and you've given us a lot to think about, but also to do. That's the important thing, to act on. So thank you so much, Megan. Benjamin. Benedict, sorry.
Yeah, hello, my name is Benedict. I go to Bracknell Working College currently, and the questions I've asked is only been offered a house once, or offered somewhere to stay once, for my independence. But since then, nothing. Haven't had anything since then. Like only one bit, and that's it. That's the only thing.
Basically, can I just support Benedict a little bit there? Benedict is obviously has entered the adulthood transition now. So he's 21 years of age, and obviously we are working towards his independence. He has the right to an independent life. And I know that the council had this project of buying houses for sharing, sort of, obviously amongst 5 people with additional needs, and the idea was the council were to buy those properties and obviously have support on site for these 5 young people with additional needs. We did get one house offered a couple of years ago, but it was the wrong time for Benedict. He felt that it was a little bit too early for him to make that transition. In fact, it was more a question of it was going to be a permanent sort of placement for housing, as opposed to what I think would be a really good thing to have in a borough is transition houses, a bit like for what you have for the care leavers. You haven't got that. So that would be a really nice thing to do, because we at home, parents, well, we're there to support them. We are trying to teach them all the skills that they need to become independent, etc. But really, that's an additional job for us, because, it's quite hard work to be able to teach all of these things. So a transition house for young people like Benedict would be great towards a permanent supported, sort of housing. So, we have been offered one house, but as I understand it, the project is now gone completely quiet.
Okay, well, we won't sort of discuss individual cases tonight, but we're going to take on board what you've said very, very seriously, because you will be looking forward to the next stage, in your life.
Next speech for the future of my life. Yeah,
absolutely.
But if they're not going to offer anymore, that's not going to give me a future. That's going to offer anymore.
No. Well, I can promise you that that we have listened very carefully, to what you've said tonight, and I'm going to make a proposal in a few moments. Okay, that will allow you to hold us to account on just that very issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can come back later.
Thank you.
And check to see whether we've done this, if the members agree with my proposal.
Okay.
There is also something else that we would like to say. Basically, Benedict has been quite, I would call it quite successful in his quest to a good life with a job, etc., because obviously we've supported him. He has been on a program called ABA. Some of the children in this borough do also have ABA, so it's not unique, because it's so it's been very successful for Benedict, and in fact the cost of his special education have gone down rather than up, which is sometimes the case when you have children who are sort of taken to very expensive special school outside of the borough. We've always said, no, Benedict has to stay where where he lives. He has to be with his cohort. He has to stay in his community, and therefore there should be something that we did successfully with that program. He's always remained in mainstream, and because when he went to his primary school, he saw his cohort going to secondary school, and we thought, no, he's got to go with them. Why should he go somewhere else where he knows nobody? So let's keep him in the community. Pardon?
It's important to be near your friends.
Absolutely, keep him in his community. So that's what we did. We've achieved that. Now he's at Bracknell in Wokingham College, and he's doing okay. He's doing well. But as I say, I think that what I find when I hear stories like Megan is basically because we're not investing in all different types of programs, which would suit better individuals, that's the reason why we're ending up with young people with all of this stress and anxieties and mental health. If we were to sort of go back to early intervention and give very good early interventions, we wouldn't be at the stage where we have young people with mental health problems. Yeah.
Just check whether Chloe and Hugo are here. I've got the impression that they were here. Hugo, Chloe?
Yes, we're here. Yes. Oh, I can't hear you now.
You'll need to speak in the microphone. You'll need to speak in the microphone.
Can you hear us? Hello?
I pressed it.
I was just
Hello?
wanting Chloe and Hugo to have
Yes,
their
can
say
you
in
hear
there
us?
online.
Yes, I'm here. Hugo, Mummy's speaking. You don't need to speak again. Hello, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can everybody else hear?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, Chloe, do you want to go first? I was wondering if like people like send people, if we could get like provided by the government like money which can be contributed for, like paid for a sports club or a gym membership, which can help with mental health and stuff, because that's all helped me with my autism and ADHD, and it would be good if everyone could get into sports because it's really helped me, and people who it could help them as well.
That's a really good suggestion, Sophie. Okay, and we will certainly make a note of that. Thank you for that. Hugo?
Hugo?
Yeah. So I was thinking, like, someone said something along the lines of this earlier. So like
About fidget toys.
yes, because like I have extreme hyperactivity and I need like fidget toys to keep me like
Focused.
yeah, focused. And some of the teachers just tell me because I'm not looking.
They tell
But
me
I'm
off.
listening. And then when they tell me off and tell me what have I just said, I just get it correct. And it's getting very annoying. And then they sometimes ban my fidget toys because I'm not looking. And I think the fidget toys helps me.
So for him, it's a lack of understanding. He needs to be able to move around and not necessarily sit at his desk. And that there's not sufficient understanding about the need that he has in order to focus. If he were to sit down at a table and not fidget, he wouldn't be able to focus and get all his answers correct as he does.
Thanks, Hugo. And I guess that was one of your mum, was it, as well?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've given us lots and lots to think about, okay? But as I said before, also to act on. Sorry?
And there's Sophie. Sophie has limited speech as well. And constantly throughout the years, I take on the point of the lady who's saying about early intervention. Yes, that would be extremely helpful because if we had early intervention with speech and language therapy, Sophie would be able to speak a lot more. But we do struggle to get speech and language therapy. And currently she only gets 3 a year, which is insufficient in my view. And staff at school are supposed to carry this on and they're not qualified. They're not qualified speech and language therapists. So whereas average children at a younger stage, 3 and 4, are given weekly sessions. This was when Sophie was young, whereas Sophie didn't get those. She got her 1 every term.
Look, what you've just said about early intervention, it makes such sense, doesn't it? And again, that's another thing which we're going to go away and think really, really carefully about. Are there any members who have any quick questions? Because I'm very conscious that We've all been here for some time already. Any quick questions? If not, I would like to propose one recommendation that our committee is. Oh, sorry, Prue.
It's not a question, Andrew. I just wanted to make the point that you might find it helpful to know that we in fact have a counsellor who needs a fidget thing in order to be able to concentrate. So we absolutely understand what you're saying, that she has Asperger's and she can't focus on what's being said unless she's got something to fiddle with. So we really do understand what you're saying to us.
Thank you for that, Prue. So I'd like to make a recommendation to the members of this committee, and that is because this has been such a valuable experience, and I cannot thank you all enough, young people and parents, all of you, okay, for giving up your time and sharing your thoughts tonight, that I'd like to recommend that the SEND Youth Forum be invited to attend this committee every year, and that this would include a review, going back to your point, Benedict, a review of the progress made since the previous visit, so that everybody will be able to see what we have done. You will be able to tell us, in your words, what you think has improved, what still needs working on. So that would be my proposal. Does that sound like a sensible idea from SEND Youth Forum?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be up for that?
Yeah.
That's really
Okay.
helpful, thank you.
So I do need to ask, I will propose that recommendation. Do we have a seconder for it? Thank you, Phil. Okay, and all those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you, that's unanimous.
Can I say one last thing? I just wanted to say the SEN budget is a very big one. So do spend it, it's the cost effectiveness of it that we need to look at, because you're spending a lot of money, but not necessarily in the right areas or not wisely, because everybody's talking in their own little department here. So we're talking about, we've got to make sure that that budget is well spent.
Thank you for that. Who would like to respond, and then Helen?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, can I just say on behalf of Prue and myself and everyone here, this has been, hugely important hearing what your experiences are, and thank you from the heart for coming along and sharing them. We hear exactly what you're saying about the SEND budget. We are now reviewing our strategy and how we're spending money. We're looking very carefully at the impact that we're having. We're in a system, so it's not just about the council, it's how the council works with schools, with health colleagues, with the whole community to get this right. We know we've still got a lot to do and a long way to go. But if you could work with us in helping to improve and work with us as we, redevelop our strategy, because it's got to be right. So thank you so much, and we will be, we'll closely work with you as we, try to improve services more. So thanks again.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you all once again, and to those of you who joined us online. Okay, so perhaps, Ian, would you be able to take them out? Thank you. Right, thank you. What a wonderful group of young people and parents. We've certainly learnt a lot from them. So agenda item 9 is the draft unaccompanied asylum seeking children strategy. This is Vicky Elliott King. Vicky, if I could just remind everybody that we have all read the report, okay? So there's no need for a presentation to go through the details again, but rather if you would like to, if you feel there is a need to briefly introduce the report, please do so. But then I'd like to move quickly on to members' questions, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you.
Understood, Chair. Thanks very much. I've got a couple of slides which I'll just share, but I'll run through them very quickly. It's just for the main points, if that's okay. It's a bit strange, isn't it? Being I'm not used to presenting, not on the screen, and being with you. So this is bear with me. Right. So I'll do it in the same way down to presentation. Okay. So just waiting for it to move to presentation mode. There we go. So just by means of background, you said this is all from the report. It will move on, hopefully. Sure, there we go. It's a little way behind, isn't it? There we are. So I don't know whether you can read that, but I'll just run through it very quickly. It's all in the report. So just a reminder of what unaccompanied asylum-seeking children are, or UASC, we abbreviate it to children outside their country of origin without care and protection of parents or a legal guardian, and a whole variety of reasons, of course, that they may leave their home. Terrifying, I think, for many of us to even contemplate some of these, but fear of persecution, parents killed, if not killed, imprisoned or missing, being forced to fight as children, being involved in war and conflict, poverty, deprivation, all those things that would terrify any of us, I'm sure, and yet they managed to find a way to escape that. So what I'm presenting you today is just our draft US strategy. It's a draft because we haven't yet moved to complete agreement of the detail of the strategy, and it will be a dynamic strategy because, of course, the circumstances for our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children change all the time, and it's going to sets out our approach to supporting and caring for our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. They are, of course, children in care, like every other child in care, and we do have a children in care strategy, and that applies to our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children too. But we know that our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children have particular circumstances, the likes of which I've just talked about, which we believe leads us to needing a separate strategy for those children to meet their particular needs. You'll be aware that our cohort of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children has grown in the last year because of the National Transfer Scheme now becoming compulsory, and the percentage of our child population that each local authority is required to accept has increased from 0.07% to 0.1%. So I think that means we've got 42, I mean, maybe correct if I'm wrong, it's 41, 42 now, unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Adam may correct me. Is that right, Adam? Are they on mute?
We currently don't have the 41, but that's the cap number that's been prescribed by the measure that they use in terms of distribution. Okay,
thank you. So specific support then that we include in the strategy. We have an enhanced advocacy officer. We have an advocate who will sit alongside our young people and work with them to make sure that they are getting their message across. And get the support they need, and that's guaranteed at the point at which they may be having an age assessment and also at their first child in care review. We have translation services which we commission, enhanced training for social workers, legal advice, which is very important, particularly when a child is first in those first terrifying few days with us. Emotional health and well-being, as we've heard from young people, is very important to young people, particularly important when you've been through a lot of traumatic situations that these young people have clearly been through. And so we now have, you'll be aware that we have a specific children in care CAMS offer that extends to, of course, to our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We have a bespoke offer for them, and we've also commissioned mental health first aid training for workers who are working alongside our children. And as you can imagine, inducting some of these young people into our education system can be quite daunting for them. And so it's very, very important that we support them through that. We have a virtual school, as you're aware. We have a specific offer for our UASC, a specific personal education plan, support for young people who are not yet admitted in school to make sure that no time is wasted in ensuring that they have access to the education support they deserve. Of course, supporting them with English as well, and wider well-being, which is so important as well, to give them those enriching opportunities for enriching activity. And then we have an app as well, which they can use to access information that they need. As it said in the report, there is a shortage of local supply of suitably matched placements for our UAS so that they can stay in Wokingham. So what that means is that we will likely meet their cultural identity needs by placing them outside of the borough currently, which is best for young people, but it's not what we want. So what we plan to do is recruit and train more foster carers and supported lodging carers in borough. Not an insignificant task, as I'm sure you'll understand, but something that we feel is very important to keep young people in the community and to develop those community links and staff and resources to be able to support young people in borough. Why that's important, as I say, is because if we can keep our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in the borough to which they are placed, into adulthood, that means that they can benefit then from the fantastic facilities that we have in the borough in training and employment opportunities, and contribute to the local economy as well. This is the last slide. So next steps, we have a US steering group which is meeting this week to make sure that we have a final strategy in place. As I said before, this is going to be our dynamic strategy. Things are changing all the time, so we'll be reviewing it regularly, and we will be setting up a community hub so that when we are able to settle more of our UASC in the borough, we will have support surrounding them to be able to do that. Development of local fostering, supported lodging and semi-independent accommodation provision. As I've already mentioned, this will be a large focus, including promotion of the fostering opportunities. And that's everything I had to say. Is that okay, Chair? Is that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Vicky. That was very helpful. This is, in one sense, a bit of a complicated agenda item because, as Vicky said, our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and care leavers are children in care and care leavers, and therefore a lot of the questions that people might have are much more suited should be directed to the corporate parenting board. And I think it is important tonight that we are clear about the distinction between our overview and scrutiny committee and the role of the corporate parenting board. Now, I'm not trying to preclude any questions that you might have, but please do keep that in mind. Once again, after any questions you have, I do have a couple of specific recommendations for us to consider. So any questions? Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm just really quite interested on page 21 about the community hub and asylum seeking children be isolated. I mean, you mentioned about work, trying to get them involved on that sort of thing and schooling and the rest of it. But what I think we kind of seen it, I think, with the children we saw or young people we saw earlier on, and I think they benefit from more of a social aspect to that as well, which they did mention sport, but I'll also would include on that like drama, music, that sort of thing, when you kind of react with other people. And that would, I would suspect, well, pretty sure it will help them not be isolated and maybe get into the wrong type of life that they shouldn't be involved with.
Thanks, Michael. Vicky?
Yes, I'd agree. I think, and that's the idea of providing more enriching activity for our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and young people as well, making sure that they have access to these exactly that sort of activities where they can socialise and learn new skills as well. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know whether Adam, maybe you've got some
Just to revert back to the point made earlier, that these are of course also looked after children, so they're majority be placed with carers. They'll be engaging with education provision, whether that's college, further education in terms of English as a second language, and they will be developing and so engaging with their peers. And also the Here For You, which is the team that works with our looked after children and care leavers, run events, whether that's football events, cricket, or they have Eid celebrations and so forth throughout the year, and different faith events throughout the year. So there are those opportunities that we create specifically for this group of young people, but also they'll be supported to engage in their local community where they're living and activities as well.
Thanks for that, Adam. Another question, Andrew?
Yeah, I was going to ask on page 33 with the sort of the graph showing sort of the steep increase in care leavers projected over the next few years. Particularly with this kind of housing and things like that, are the sort of plans and strategy, do we think that they're actually going to be enough for the sort of 25-26 projected, or are we going on the assumption that actually lots of them will still be outside the borough? I mean, do we have the capacity for all of those ones to be within the borough if that is the case?
So we are doing.
Sorry, I'll hand over to Adam for this.
Sorry, we are doing some work in terms of looking at developing our offer in terms of supported accommodation. But the accommodation is for a care leaver isn't just support; it's also about their final accommodation where they'll live. That will be self-funded, self-supported when they're living in independence, and often that's linked to their status being resolved. And sometimes for our young people, their status US when they become care leavers. Their status hasn't been resolved by the Home Office, which sort of in some ways restricts their ability to live independently because they cannot work or claim benefits and so forth that support them independently. So it's about having a range of accommodation for different needs, whether some will stay with their foster carers under staying put, some will stay in supported accommodation, and some will be living independently. So we are very conscious of this growth, and that chart sort of maps that. Because of the way the NTS works is that as a young person ages out and becomes a care leaver, you therefore have another young person coming to care, and often they're aged about 16 or 17. So we know that that's going to sort of create that growth or increase in our care leavers.
Do you have a supplementary question?
No.
Thank you, Jane.
Hi there. I sit on the Wokingham Refugee Steering Group, and one of the things we've really struggled with is ESOL provision and making sure there was enough English in place. It's obviously critical for these children in terms of being able to engage at school. How many hours a week English provision do they get?
So the virtual school will have a role with them when they come into care. I couldn't tell you the exact hours. I know Ming's on the call in terms of my peer in education. I'm not sure if he'll have that information available, but that's a key role that the virtual school and the social worker will take. Will be looking at engaging them in education, whether that's college or through the school, and ESOL will be a key part of that.
Yeah, I'd like
Jane, on that point, could I ask Adam whether it might be possible for Jane and any others who are interested to actually visit and speak with some members of the virtual school to probe such questions a little more?
I think Ming's on the call here. I can see him. I don't think that would be
Chair, I wonder if I could come in. I chair the virtual school governing body, and if any elected members wanted to come along to that meeting, you would hear directly from the head teacher of the virtual school, and we've also got school leaders from across the borough on that governing body for the virtual school. So you'd be very welcome. So please just get in touch if you'd like to come along.
Thank you. Do you have anything else on that issue, Jane? Thank you, Ian.
Thanks. I was just wondering how it is that there's a whole load of children that come ashore or off aircraft or by various means. How I presume it's the Home Office is choosing which ones go to which boroughs. I just wonder how is that a roll of the dice or what? It's just reading the report this afternoon. The thing that leapt out of me was a whole load of children are sent to whatever borough it is. And then it's quite clear from the diagram, a whole load of those children are then sent back almost to inside the M25. I just don't understand the process of how this choice gets taken.
So it's a very complex picture to describe, but I would say that the country is divided into regions. and each region has a number of local authorities. So we're part of the South East, which is 19 local authorities, and in that region will be the South Coast authorities, which tend to have a lot of arrivals, children arriving through either ports. Wokingham is obviously not a port. We don't have a port, so some authorities don't have ports, but they may have service stations and motorways, which can be points of arrival in terms of children exiting from lorries or transit in terms of that route. So the NTS tends to distribute the National Transfer Scheme, the South East region, which runs that, tends to distribute children who have arrived in the South East. So they tend to be Ken or the coastal authorities. And you've probably heard in the news around the hotels where they're putting children because they're unable to find local authorities to take those young children to move them out of hotels into a care setting where they're looked after. So that's really the mechanics of it are as they are. Really, the South East transfer, we told that that part of the country is in receipt, and therefore there'll be a number of children that the South East will distribute and allocate across the South East local authorities. And the number was mentioned earlier, that our 0.01 number is 41, and that's the number that we take children on a rota basis across the South East when the South East is on as the region in the country, and we take children into our care. When children, I think the other bit is when children are choosing to leave their home country for whatever reasons they may be, Wokingham, I doubt, would be very surprised if that was their sort of choice in terms of arrival. Many children don't have, where they end up is not where they were choosing to go or what their choice. It does tend to be very either family members in other parts of the country or people they know, or connections or contacts from their community at home.
Thank you, Adam. And I think it's really useful for all members of this committee to understand how the allocation process works. So thank you for that, Prue.
Just one small point. Not all of them ever physically come here. Quite often they're placed somewhere where they are already, and we have responsibility for them, but they are perhaps fostered somewhere else, or they're in some sort of supported living scheme somewhere else, or whatever else it is, or sometimes with members of their extended family, for example. We've had to, so they're not all physically here, but how we get them is known only to the Home Office, I think, as a choosing system.
What was really going through my mind is because they're not here, they're somewhere else, it makes it difficult, surely, for us to keep an eye on them, look after them, provide the service. It's strange.
So that was the point that Vicky was making earlier in terms of the strategy, was that the plan is to have more children living, so more unaccompanied asylum seeking children living locally to Wokingham, either in borough or on the periphery of the borough, because that supports in terms of their engagement with the virtual school, with our looked after CAM service, with their social workers. So wherever they are placed, if they're living in Bracknell or Reading or a London borough, the social worker will still visit as frequently as they would be if they were in borough. They will still have access to the virtual school. So team from the virtual school with Jane as the head teacher will be going out doing their PEP meetings and so forth. So they will still receive those same services, but they'll just be at distance.
Thank you. Richard.
I feel I've missed the first note on virtual school. So could I have a bit of a kind of overview of, is this permanent or temporary, full-time or top-up, and how targeted and personal is it?
Ming?
Do you want me to give them a brief account to member about virtual school? Virtual school is a statutory setting. Is a virtual school for local children. It is run like a school, but it's a virtual. It has governing body, which chaired by our DCF Helen, which just mentioned. He just mentioned and welcome member to get contact. And the way we virtual school operate is we work together with the school's lead teacher or lead person responsible for look after children to make sure look after children's education is a priority in school, and we hold school to account to make sure that is happening, and we provide reasonable support, advice, and challenge as well where we do not think school have done it best. The virtual school also to make sure every child have an individual education plan called PEP, the plan, and then we QA the plan to make sure the plan is sound, is of high quality, and also virtual school make sure the school using the pupil premiums in effective way. Focus on the area that children who need support most. So that's basically how virtual school run. They don't run a school, physical school, you like, but it's a statutory function of local authority. Of course, we welcome the member to have more discussion about virtual school. Recently, we have some conversation with the Ofsted. Clearly, the progress, the excellent work virtual school have been delivered, have been recognized, have been acknowledged by regulatory body. But in order to understand the detail, we really welcomed member to get in touch either through the chair. Or
Thank you
myself.
very much for that, Ming. That's really helpful. Could I also ask whether it might be possible to forward to Richard and any other members of the new members of the committee the most recent reports of the virtual school, because we do consider reports from the virtual school on a very regular basis, and I think you'd find that very informative. Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions from members? Okay. Well, I am prone to suggest that we make recommendations wherever that could be productive. Okay, so I'm going to make some proposals. The first recommendation is that we accept the report's recommendation on page 17, i.e. that the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 1, notes the content of the draft USAC strategy and how it complements the overarching children in care and care leaver strategy, and 2, notes its finalisation, plans for its finalisation and implementation. Okay, we can vote for all of these on block, or if there are any questions at the end, we can take them. The second recommendation is, and it's coincidental that we've just been talking about the virtual school, where there was very recently a very successful peer review, and I note that the USAC strategy is still under development. Okay, what I would like to recommend is that the committee recommends consideration be given to a peer review of the USAC strategy within 12 months, and for its findings to be presented to the committee. Okay, so once the strategy has been agreed, that in other words, it comes back to this committee for a review where we can explore progress made. So that would be my second recommendation. I do note in Vicky's report that there was concerns expressed about funding for care leavers. The funding for our unaccompanied asylum-seeking care leavers is considerably reduced after they reach the age of 18. So I would like to recommend that this council ask the leader of the council to write to the relevant Secretary of State and all MPs representing parts of the borough, asking that central government grants be raised to cover the full costs of USAC care leavers to this borough. And the final recommendation, that Lucienne helps to arrange invitations to members, to all members of this committee wishing to join a meeting of the virtual school governing body. So there's 4 recommendations there in total. Does anyone have any questions, comments, suggestions for amendments to any of those? I think we do need to vote on recommendations. We can do that in block. On block, okay. So all of those in favour. Sorry, do we have? I'll propose those 4 recommendations. Do we have a seconder? Okay, Ian. Okay, all of those in favour of the 4 recommendations. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky. Okay, and I think that we're going to hear from you again in a little while, in a little moment. Okay, now agenda item 10, home to school transport. Sorry?
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, agenda item 10, home to school transport. Now, I'm going to ask either Helen or Ming to make a statement about this in a moment, but my understanding is that advice received yesterday from Andrew Moulton is that this item ought not to be discussed this evening to avoid any possibility that discussion might compromise the integrity of the public consultation that began last week. Could either Helen or Ming?
Claire, I'm happy Ming has come on screen.
Thank you.
I'm very happy for Ming to take this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Helen. Yeah, as Chair just stated, while we are eager to present this to this panel, and the timing apparently we were advised is not right because the consultation is taking place at the moment. We were advised that presenting this paper to discuss the detail or undermine the integrity of the public consultation, as the chair just said that. So we will request another extraordinary meeting very soon after consultation take place, so that we can have good discussion, debate, whatever about this matter. I would think probably sometime in August, subject to committee's approval for extraordinary meeting, so we can discuss this matter at that time.
Thank you. And that extraordinary meeting sometime in August would be to for us to scrutinise the new home to school transport policy or amendments to the existing policy.
Andrew, sorry to interrupt. You don't ever get to see my hand up as I'm behind you. I just wondered about the transport survey. I understand about the integrity. I just wondered whether it's possible to ask a question about the previous transport policy that was run last year.
Yes, absolutely.
So last year a transport survey was run, and I just wanted to check how much of that information, because a lot of the questions are similar, how much of that information has actually transferred into or been part of the consultation for the new transport survey. I just want to make sure that the information that was part of the previous one that was run last year has actually been integral in this one.
Ming?
My understanding, I did not directly get involved in that rewriting of the policy, but I fully understand that any surveys, including last year's surveys, the feedback have been taken into account.
Okay, so Sarah, that was your concern, wasn't it? That feedback from the previous transport survey be taken into account?
Yes, sorry, and along with because some of the results of that one doesn't start until September 23, so we don't know yet the impact of that transport policy, and I just wanted to check that those risk factors have been factored into this upcoming one.
Yes, I try not to get too much into the discussion about the current one as advice, but I can assure you that any feedback, any risk factor, we have checked, and we also have external expert to check all those risks, possible risks, or anything we think we need to double check with expert. I can only say that without going into too much detail of the current policy, the proposed policy.
Sarah, do you want to probe that any further?
No, I can take that up at the next meeting.
In August, probably, Sarah, or we can discuss out of this meeting. Right.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Ming. Just before we leave this agenda item, I do think that deferring tonight's discussion on homeschool transport was not ideal, but I understand why this is necessary, and I believe it's essential that we respect the advice of the monitoring officer on this matter. I want to remind, members that our role on overview and scrutiny is to ensure that due process in matters, in this case, such as possible changes to homeschool transport policy, has been followed at all stages. And of course, this process has now begun. So with this in mind, could somebody, okay, please just very briefly outline for information purposes only, rather than for discussion, what the process has been thus far and what it will be going forward, just to help us to feel satisfied that due process is being followed. Prue or Helen?
I can give some very rough, I suggest, rough sort of timeline, and then colleague Zoe will give more detail. So again, without going into too much detail about the policy, we have set up a project group that's been running for nearly over 2 months now, chaired by an experienced director, working on Borough Council, who has the experience of working with several local authority in this matter, to develop, to study the current policy, to look at the situation across the country, to contact other local authority to see whether they are other good example, good and successful experience of refining the policy to make sure children need transport support the most will get the support. So as a result, the revised policy have been proposed, and then I think let's go, as you can understand, let's go through the internal management, school tonight. Let's when the officers, senior officers, approval for this to go ahead to present it for public consultation, and then we get agreement from the administration and the council senior manager for this to go out for public consultation. Now it's already out for consultation. It went out on the Friday before last week. Out of my head, I think it is correct, for public consultation. And initially, we thought this process, the discussion at this panel can take place at the same time, but apparently that's not the right process. So we now revise that, asking your understanding. So we're going to have a extraordinary meeting, if approved by this committee, and to have that in early August, possibly. And this will need to go to the council's executive to get a formal approval in order for the new policy to be implemented. We aim for this policy to be implemented in September 2024. It's not September immediately, in the next few months. Let's the rough timeline, give some idea, the process we need to go through. My colleague Zoe is closer to this matter in the project involved in all the process and revising of the policy as well. Zoe, do you want to add anything in terms of question about the process, the timeline?
No, I think you've covered everything there. I mean, to be honest, that's the steps that we have followed and the steps that are yet to come. So yeah, nothing further to add.
Okay, I think that's very helpful. Are there any members who have any questions about the process? Michael?
Sort of linked to the process, Chairman. Yes, it's really about, we've got this down as a verbal report. I do trust that when it comes back, it'll be a typed report. It's obviously a lot in it, a lot to read, and I think members would appreciate to have a good read of it and then come up with some good questions.
You're absolutely right. Thank you. We will be scrutinising the strategy, the draft strategy. So Prue?
Yeah, just although it's not directly connected with this, it is connected with the subject. You had this hangover request for information about the training given to drivers and so on, and it will probably be handy if that could be covered at the same meeting because it's the same subject and you're waiting for that information as a committee. So I'm sure we could provide that at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prue. That would be...
Chair, can I just point out, that's a very good suggestion. Although I would like to bring to your attention, in our work plan, transport training is scheduled for September's panel, but we can, that you member which can bring forward to coincide with the discussion about on school transport. Just to bring to your attention, that already been scheduled for September.
Yes, thank you, Ming. Okay, if there are no further questions, Phil?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, please. Are you saying that this is going to be definitely implemented in September 24? In which case, why is there the need to rush through an extraordinary meeting of this committee?
Because you have to have, if you're going to implement something in September 24, you have to agree it a year in advance. So it has to be agreed by the 15th of September 2023 to be implementable in September 2024.
The reason for that is because people are choosing schools in October in the previous year, and the homeschool transport will be part of their thinking.
Absolutely, Deputy Chair. Also, we feel it is very important to communicate it to residents properly, give them sufficient time to absorb this, absorb any change and the impact on them. Yeah.
But that's a very helpful question, Phil. Thank you for that. Okay, in the absence of any further questions, I'd like to propose 3 recommendations. I'm not sure if the first one is really necessary, but I think it would be good just as a formality that this committee requests or approves would support an extraordinary meeting to consider the draft homeschool transport strategy in August of 2023. The second recommendation is picking up on Sarah's point. This committee recommends that appropriate information from the previous survey and any initial indications of impacts that the new strategy might have, the strategy that comes in 2023 might have, be considered in the new strategy. I'm sorry I'm not being more articulate. I hope we can agree some wording on that after the meeting, Lucienne. And the third recommendation, picking up on a point that Prue made, we do have an outstanding item, a very important outstanding item, and this is a request for information about training given to homeschool transport drivers and their escorts. And the recommendation would be that this be included in the discussion during the extraordinary meeting in August. In fact, I would like, picking up on Michael's point, I would like some little written report on that specific matter to come to that meeting in August. So 3 recommendations there. Does anybody have any questions at all about any of those recommendations? Anyone like to suggest any amendments or any additional recommendations? If not, I will propose them. Do we have a seconder? Andrew? Okay. And we can vote on block. Okay. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So moving on, agenda item 11, the impact of the cost of living crisis. And again, this is Vicky. Vicky, I'm going to make the same introduction stroke plea as I made in your earlier presentation. Please, let's assume that all members of the committee, have read what is a very, very helpful report indeed. Okay, so if we could please keep this to a brief introduction,
of course,
and then move straight on to questions.
Of course, Chair. Please, if I'm talking too much, please do stop me. If I'm giving you more information and it's information that you've already read, please do feel free to stop me talking. So, yes, I'm here to just give you the paper gives you an update on the response to the cost of living crisis, which is something, of course, we're all very familiar with. Just by means of background, you'll see in the paper. This, of course, the cost of living emergency was declared by the council in September 22, very quickly followed by an emergency response, which was set up. A group was set up, which was led by the Hardship Alliance. If you're not familiar with who the Hardship Alliance are, it's a group comprising Woking Borough Council, Age UK, Citizens Advice, First Days, and Woking United Charities. And the group also included assistant directors from across the council. There were 7 work streams, and it was very much a needs-led approach. So we were looking very closely at what was happening. And again, it was a very quickly moving situation. So the outcome of that work, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'm too fast. The outcomes from that work were the conversation very quickly moved on to the importance of, whilst it was very important to make sure that we had the response in place to make sure we had everything we needed to respond to this, more important perhaps was how we communicated it, because there was an understanding, I think, very quickly that this was going to affect more people than these sorts of crises had affected before, and the sorts of people who may have never had any engagement with the council, any need at all to seek support. And so it was very important we got that messaging right, so that we would make sure that those people felt confident to come forward and not stigmatized. So we also talked about at the same time that there were going to be a group of people in the Woking borough, it being an affluent borough, who wouldn't be affected so much by this, but on the other hand may want to help. And so those conversations were had. We had a lot of data coming in from various parts of the community and from our voluntary sector partners, so that we were able to get a clear understanding of what was happening. Then we were able to respond in a very focused way. Communications I've talked about, and the crowdfunding. So that again was in the recognition that there'd be people in the borough who would want to help. 25k was raised. That was matched by Woking United Charities and the council. So 75k in total. We distributed energy saving items, warm items, and we had a whole set of warm hubs in the borough so that people could go to those if they felt that they didn't want to use energy in their own homes. And that page you see there is the page that's on the Woking website that points people towards the support that they can get. And there was a lot of support. Mobilising support wasn't the issue. The issue was getting the message out to people to make sure they felt empowered to be able to access it. We also have you'll be familiar with the Holiday Activities and Food Programme, perhaps. So this is a DFE funded programme which is focused on alleviating food poverty, so childhood food poverty, and provides free of charge provision activities, healthy meals over the Christmas, Easter and summer holidays. And the demand has doubled this year for this provision. So we are understanding that people are struggling. Trends. So I mean, there's a lot of data out there which shows you what's happening, and I think we all know the seriousness of the situation. But I think when you see these graphs, it just makes it so stark. So what you see on the left-hand side is the graph showing the change in the number of families living in relative poverty, so relative low income. What that means, you see the trend going up, is even if there is a reduction in families living in absolute poverty, the fact that there are more families living in relative poverty means that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider. So that just gives you some information about that, and you can see the trend line running through there. Things are very hard. And then pupils eligible for and claiming free school meals has gone up from 5% in 2013, just over 5%, to almost double now, 9%, 8.5%, 9%. That is a huge change. So just to give you some idea of the context. This then is from Citizens Advice. This is a really interesting graph, actually, because what you see there is a lot of colour. But if you look at the blue and the green bars particularly, so the blue one is demand for charitable support or contacts through the Citizens Advice for charitable support for food banks, and green is energy. And you see quite naturally that there is a spike during the winter months for energy support, but it's evened out, and even during the summer months that demand is still there, and it's still far higher than it was in 2019. And so you just get a sense, I think, of how people are struggling. This one then just gives you some information, because we're talking about families and we're talking about children, about where that demand is coming from, and you can see there that there is a large amount of demand, not surprisingly, perhaps from single people with dependent children, so single person families, couples with dependent children as well, and single people. I mean, demand from across society, but it feels that it's families with children, particularly single families, who are really struggling the most and seeking support. The food bank, again, the trend is up. So this is the trend from March 2022 to March 2023. A big spike in demand during December, but still the trend is up over the year. And then if you look at the referrals, again, a lot of referrals from single parents, from families, and fuel vouchers as well. So the Household Support Fund is still in operation. So this is something you may remember. This started off as the COVID Support Fund, I think, way back in the days we'd rather not remember, but still in operation, because it's very much still needed. And you'll see there 240,000 roughly pounds worth of free school meal vouchers still being distributed even now. And non-free school meal support is also still being distributed as well. So you see that the figures to 587 households. So I mean, what I've tried to do here is just give a flavour really of the need that still exists, even though we may feel that we're going into the summer months. There is still demand out there. There's still a lot of people struggling. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? I'll begin, if I may, with two questions then. The first question, and I do want to keep it focused on children's services, okay? But my question is, how concerned is WBC about the impacts of the rapidly increasing financial stress due to escalating mortgage repayments and rents in the private sector? And in particular, can anybody share any thoughts, any officers share any thoughts, what could be some of the worst case scenarios in terms of matters falling within the remit of children's services? What impacts, in other words, could this new significant rapidly increasing financial stress have on demand for children's services?
Perhaps I can just start that conversation. I mean, my feel is that we have a lot of heavily mortgaged families in Wokingham. It's a borough which has a lot of people who have a lot of debt, I think. And so this is going to affect people. Again, it's those families who we wouldn't normally see. We're going to put a lot of stress on families. Whether that will translate into demand for our services, I don't know. I can't say, because that it can cause stress for families, but whether that stress requires us to intervene, I don't know. But it's conceivable that there could be mental health issues for families who are worried about this, which can have knock-on effects for children. So it may require us to make sure that schools are supporting families in the right way. But whether it'll tip into higher need, it's unprecedented times, isn't it? And I think we've just got to be alert to the fact that things may happen we're just not expecting.
Would any of the other officers or Prue like to add anything to that? Thank you, Vicky. Anyone else like to add something?
I'd just like to say that it's more about indirect impact, but we don't have any evidence yet. In terms of teacher recruitment, particularly young teachers enter the career, try to buy somewhere to live or to keep their house in Wokingham. Or I don't know, Adam may make comment about young social worker want to have house, whether keep up with the mortgage or not. They find it difficult, may indirectly impact on our children, young people, our children learner. But we can find out more from school, from the community to see whether it's cost of living increase, impact on our recruitment to teacher. I already heard a few teachers say that recruitment to teaching position had been challenged. Probably later I can think of chair internal indirect impact.
Okay, thanks, Ming. And Adam?
I think it's difficult, as Ming said, to draw any clear correlation or causation, but I think it probably would be right to consider that the financial context we know that it is impacting on potentially impacting on recruitment across the board in terms of social workers, and I would imagine that is probably playing out across other fields and impacting on families. I think that we did see an increase in demands on services. It's difficult to unpick the correlation between post-COVID changes and the financial context. I think it's probably something we'll only know looking backwards in a few years' time in terms of that evidence, in terms of what the reasons people describe as opposed to what they are when you're looking back and doing some sort of review or research in relation to it.
Okay, any other comments at all on that issue? Andrew?
Yeah, sort of related to it in general. I mean, and I know this is a report on sort of what's happened so far. I mean, are there sort of projections about what sort of support might be needed in the winter coming up? Because I know, things are still looking to be pretty bad, and it kind of links on to that. Is the report shows. It's good that there are lots of charities and things helping out with this, but my slight worry is, is there an over-reliance on charity at times, and almost, what do we do if the charities can't help out anymore, if there's too much demand, especially with the mortgage-related stuff, if that tips food banks over the edge, if that sort of, what can we do to help with that?
That's a fantastic question, and I think we are starting to see charities really struggling. So where there's been plenty of support for charities before, now that the local councils, not just Woking, but other councils are starting to struggle financially, they don't have the ability to be able to support charities. Neither do other bodies who would normally support charities. We're watching that incredibly closely at the moment because we just don't know what knock-on effect that's going to have. I mean, it's an interesting question because we seem to be managing at the moment, but it could so easily flip. And the sort of, the reliance on charities, if charities stop being able to operate, I really don't have an answer to what would happen next. But we are working very closely with charities and talking to them all the time about what's happening and trying to help out where we can and support them where we can. But it's a very good question.
I agree with what Vicky has just said, and I think, Andrew, it would be really useful for this committee to consider inviting the hardship representatives from the Hardship Alliance to come back to this committee. They did meet with us a little while ago, okay, and I think it would be very important, for us to invite them back to review what progress has been made since that. Since that meeting, and also to see what sort of new challenges they and current challenges they're facing.
I mean, sorry, just one more thing, I guess to say. I think one thing just to note is that the way this council has worked with the voluntary sector over COVID and now has been fantastic. I think we're very lucky as a borough that we have a community which is really willing to help and get involved. And I think we mustn't take that for granted, I guess, is my thinking.
Ian?
We just talked about the mortgage side. I thoroughly agree with what's been said there. I'm also concerned about the rental side. There's a lot of houses out there that have been the buy-to-rent market, and a lot of those landlords are getting out of it because they're not getting their costs covered. So they're either getting out or they're putting the rental costs up, and also because they're getting out, it's reducing the number of houses on the rental market, which in itself increases the demand and puts the rental market up. So, have we got starting to get any figures through coming on that line?
Not that I'm aware of yet, but I'm sure it'll be something which will be on people's minds as we get information coming out about that. But it's a very good point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's a situation that could escalate very, very quickly indeed, and we need to have a nimble response to that. Thank you for that, Ian. Any other questions? Phil?
Yeah, could you tell me, have we got any indication of how many children there are that are without any food at the moment, or that have been picked up by their school teachers or anyone else who's had contact with those children, so that rather than just those people who the parents happen to be able to turn up to citizens' advice, but if we got any feel for how many children there are who are showing the signs that they're not eating properly?
That's a really good question. I think we would, because we focus our efforts on children who are in receipt of free school meals, we hope that through our communications with the schools, for example, about the holiday activities and food programme, we would get to know those families. The schools are incredibly good at referring families to us if they are struggling. And we've got really good relationships with the schools which allow us to do that. And so whilst I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly how many, what I would say is that the communication with the school is good enough, I hope, that they would tell us if a family was struggling. What I should say as well about the holiday activities and food programme is it's not only children who are in receipt of free school meals, but also on the edge, or families who are suddenly dipping into struggling, but aren't yet eligible for free school meals, who perhaps have the mortgage issue, who we can also help through that programme. So schools will let us know if they're noticing a family is really struggling, even though previously they've been relatively wealthy. So to that extent, I'm assured. However, I completely take the point.
But yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking is, it's from what you're saying, is that the numbers that we're seeing are probably pretty well representative. They're not just like the tip of a hidden iceberg, which would have been a worry.
No, I would be assured that our relationships with schools are sound enough that they would let us know when a family is struggling or they're noticing a family struggling.
Including any children who are not eligible for free school meals.
Correct, and that's the important bit, particularly at the moment, because those are the children who fall through the net sometimes. And as you say, through the mortgage issue, someone can suddenly dip into having all sorts of issues and may feel, ashamed to say it. And so we're very clear that, we'll be discreet. We're absolutely here to help.
Phil, would you like to probe that any further, or would anybody else like to probe that issue? Richard? Sorry, me?
Thanks, Chair. Probably Vicky already said what I wanted to say. Just like that, I would like to give you reassurance that we have strengthened partnership with school. All those key issues will be picked up. We don't think there'll be any big surprise. Another thing I would like to add, corporately, we now have anti-poverty strategy group. Education is part of that, and we will always contribute to the corporate coordinate, not just children's services, the whole council's approach to the anti-poverty strategy. I just would like to add that to this particular member group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ming. Any other questions on this agenda item? If not, I would again like to make some recommendations. The first recommendation is that officers are thanked for their comprehensive written report. Secondly, and this follows from page 43 of that report, that the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the response to date to children's, young people's and family support needs during the ongoing cost of living crisis. And thirdly, that the committee receives a brief update on this matter, and I emphasise brief update, not a full report, at its 6th of September meeting, and at that meeting reaches a decision about how best to proceed with further updates on the impacts of the cost of living crisis on children and children's services, including progress made since the committee met with representatives of the Hardship Alliance. And I think at that meeting, we would make a decision as to when we would like to meet with the Hardship Alliance representatives again. So 3-tiered recommendations again. Any questions at all about any of those? Anyone like to suggest any amendments? Any additional recommendations? Okay, I've proposed the recommendations. A seconder? Jane? Okay, all of those in favour of those 3 recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Vicky. And I think that's you done tonight, isn't it? No? I do beg your pardon, I shouldn't have. You are, of course, most welcome. Okay, agenda item 12, the Ofsted ILACS inspection.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Adam is joining me for this. We've sent the report out with the papers and wanted the guidance of the committee as to whether it would be helpful for us to use some slides that we've got, or alternatively, if the committee would prefer, we can answer questions.
Okay, I'm open, of course, to take the advice of and the wishes of the committee. We have all seen the ILACS report, the full ILACS report, and we've read it. I think it's also very, very important for us all to understand that the action plan, the response to the ILACS report, is being produced as we speak. And that action plan will be considered at the 6th of September meeting. Okay, so I would imagine that some of the specific questions would be addressed better addressed when we cite the action plan. But that's my view. Any comments from anybody? So Helen was saying, would she like us to see the slides or go straight to questions? My preference, I think, would be to go straight to questions.
The slides explain the process of an ILACS inspection. So if it would be helpful to go through some of those, we can do so. Alternatively, we can answer questions. Just to build on Andrew's previous point, we are working on an action plan. We have to submit an action plan formally to Ofsted by early August. And we've had an improvement board in place for some time that has been keeping the oversight of the improvements that we're making.
Yeah, I have heard from at least one person they'd like to see the slides so that we can understand better the ILACS process. Ian?
Helen, just a suggestion. We have an extraordinary meeting that we're going to be having in August on home to school transport. I just wondered if we might cover your action plan at the same time, because that way we might be able to give it councillor backing.
I think the action plan will have gone to Ofsted ahead of the meeting, but we're obviously happy to have the action plan scrutinised, the improvement plan scrutinised by this committee. My only reservation would be the home to school transport consultation is a major piece of work, and allowing sufficient time for that in the meeting.
No, if it's already gone, then no, we'll leave it to the 6th of September.
Thank you. So if we could just go quickly through the slides outlining the ILACS inspection process.
Okay, so myself and Helen did this between us, so I'll start off with the slides. I've got them up there, I hope you can see them. So ILACS stands for Inspection of Local Authority Children's Services. So local authorities will usually receive these inspections once every 3 years, give or take 6 months either way. And our last one was in June 19. And those that are in the training early, we did talk about the inspection framework and how that was every 3 years. So unlike a focus visit, so we've had focus visits within the last 3 years. I believe we've had 2, if I recall, it was 2. Inspectors will gather evidence around the full ILACS scope. So that's the full agenda and their full scope. This means they'll be looking at the experiences of any child or young person who is at risk of harm, has been referred to the local authority, is subject to a child protection plan or assessed as no longer needing a child protection plan, is receiving social work services without meeting threshold for significant harm, for example, a child in need, is missing from education or are being offered alternative provision, is looked after, qualifies as any form of care leaver or was left care to return home under a special guardianship order, child arrangement order or adoption order. So from that, what that covers all aspects of children's social care work and also touches on some education areas as well. In addition to this, inspectors will evaluate the impact of our leaders and managers on social work practice and whether our own evaluation of our performance and practice is accurate. So every year we create a self-evaluation document. We meet with Ofsted every year. We had one, I think it was about 6 weeks ago, if I recall. And we do our own self-evaluation, and we meet and go through that, and we submit those to Ofsted every year. And what they're interested in is our own evaluation of ourselves. So since January 2023, there is a new distinct criteria that was added to the ILACS framework, and that was our work with care leavers. So before January 2023, care leavers were considered within our work with children in care. So what does the ILACS look like? What does it consist of? So it's a 3-week inspection. Literally, we get a phone call on a Monday morning. We don't know when it's going to be, and they advise us that they will be coming. So a phone call comes into the council. They ask to speak to the Director of Children's Services, and that conversation is to inform the director that there will be an inspection. And by that afternoon, we have to gather together and have a meeting with the lead inspector to discuss the focus or the area or the arrangements and management of their inspection. So in week 1 of the inspection, they are not on site, they are remote, and they require lots of information. So what they start doing is they start gathering their lines of inquiry, their overview, their view of Wokingham. They'll be looking at reports that are in the public domain, strategies, information that we've published and information that we've shared with them. So they're provided with a huge spreadsheet covering child level data, and that's information about audits we've undertaken. So again, it's about how well we know ourselves, audits we've undertaken of children receiving services. And we conduct those audits. We have a monthly audit cycle, and we have to share the last 6 months of audits. And we also share about 190 pieces of management information. So that's data reports, quality assurance framework, strategies, and so forth. And that child level data will list children. It won't have their names, but it will have their status, the service they are receiving, their reference number, so they can cross-reference them on our system when they're on site. And that will be going back. So children that were open in receipt of a service, they will look back over a 6-month period and then looking at the current children as well. So week 1 is a huge industry of generating all those documents, generating reports, and all being uploaded onto a portal that Ofsted give you. So during this time, we're doing business as normal, as well as a lot of officers being distracted in terms of pushing all that information up to Ofsted. Week 2, the inspection team arrives, and they arrive on a Monday afternoon. And they start on site gathering information. So they literally floor walk, or they arrange meetings with workers. They have interviews, they case sample, they observe, they speak to children. And then the Friday of week 2 is dedicated to off-site evaluation. So they're here until the Thursday, and then the Friday they're off-site weighing up and balancing all the information they've gathered. And then week 3 of the inspection follows the same pattern. But again, on the final Friday is when they deliver feedback. Every day throughout week 2 and 3, we, the leadership team of Wokingham, meet with the inspectors in the morning to what are called keeping in touch meetings or KIT meetings, and they share information around what their lines of inquiry are, observations. They might challenge us, we might challenge them back on assumptions they're making and information, and that's quite a rich and can be challenging dialogue both ways in terms of observations. So during their visit, remember, we're a small authority. We have the same number of inspectors as go to Oxfordshire.
Shall I carry on talking? Because I have the slides open on my screen, but sadly not on the large screen. Okay, so I'm not online. Sorry, that would just complicate things. So just carrying on where Adam's left off, I'm sure Adam's just messaging me to say he's got a computer issue. He'll be back as soon as possible. So yes, we have the same size team as a much larger local authority in terms of the numbers of inspectors. That clearly is of significance because it means the impact on the size of the workforce that we have here was significant. So range of workers interviewed, foster carers, prospective adopters, 60 staff from our Children's Social Care Department. Obviously, Prue as lead member and the chief executive were interviewed. Ofsted also do a 360 of other agencies that have, that work with very closely with children's services. For example, the designated family judge, CAFCAS, the Child and Family Court Advisory Service, the independent scrutineer for the Children's Safeguarding Partnership, the emergency duty team, the school's designated teachers and safeguarding leads, fostering panel chair and the adoption panel chair. As part of this inspection team, we had an expert education inspector who was on site for 2 days, because the interface with the virtual school that's been spoken about a number of times in the meeting was a really important one, and how we support vulnerable learners in the borough. And we also had what's called a regulatory inspector with a very significant specialism in fostering, who was also on site, really applying that lens as to how we support children who may be fostered. So I'm going to carry on. I'm sure Adam will be back on in a moment. So in terms of the findings of the report, Ofsted always make recommendations for improvement. It is a deficit model. So there are always recommendations for improvement. Welcome back, Adam. So I'm on the findings slide. Shall I just keep going? I'll keep going. So the key recommendations are actually on the slide that's now up on the screen. So the timeliness of assessments of children's needs, quality, clarity and timeliness of child in need, child protection and pathway plans. So these are plans for children in terms of the improvements that we want to see, the aspirations that we have for them. The quality and impact of frontline supervision and management oversight, the timeliness, the accuracy and the accessibility of children's records, and the response to children who are vulnerable to exploitation. We want to highlight the positives as well. So the next slide highlights a lot of positives, because as everyone's aware, it can look like a quite negative lens sometimes reading Ofsted reports, and actually what we've done is pull out on this slide some very positive statements about working in Wokingham, and this is from the mouths of practitioners, from the mouths of our workforce, because Ofsted set great store by what children say to them, what families say to them, and what individual members of our staff group say. Care leavers were very complimentary about the practical and emotional support that they receive. We were applauded for responding proactively, and we've spoken about this earlier, to the growing numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and have ensured that they are provided with effective care and support. Which is a very positive statement. Statement there about foster carers being well prepared and assessed for the role they'll undertake, and they get appropriate training and support, quite rightly so. And last but not least, there was reference to an impressive specialist team, which is the Compass team, that works intensively to help children to either remain at home or to support stability for children in care. So important that we capture the positives, because there were many that were brought to our attention. As Adam's referenced earlier, I believe this was a judgment inspection. And the judgments are set down on the slide. Ofsted saw significant improvements in some areas, very specifically the experience and progress of children in care, which moved from requires improvement in the previous ILACs or version of it in 2019 to good. Ofsted also commented in the report around improvements for services for children with disabilities. But we had challenges. We weren't far off good in some areas. I think we've got a good bedrock on which to build in terms of the improvement plan that we're working on now. But we came out with requires improvement to be good overall. So clearly further work to do to achieve that good overall rating that we would all aspire to achieve. So I think we've got one final slide, which is the next steps, which we've referenced earlier in terms of the improvement plan, the deadline for that. As Adam has said, we've had the annual engagement meeting with Ofsted in May, and they have said to us they will come back to do likely to be a focused visit. Again, not within a time frame, but we anticipate within a year of the full inspection that took place in March this year. And then there will be a further inspection, a focused visit or a joint targeted area inspection prior to the next judgment inspection, which is likely to be 3 years from March this year. So we're happy to take any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Helen and Adam. Okay, any questions from members? Mindful of the fact that the improvement plan to respond to the inspection report is going to be considered at the 6th of September meeting. Okay, so Phil?
Yes, thank you. So my understanding from looking back is that the judgment categories remain the same as they were in 2019. So the questions that I have really, and I'll give them straight out, is were there any surprises with the judgment grades that have been given here, or were they already expected from within your team? Were there any particular themes that you may have been able to identify as to why the improvements have not been made in these areas in order to bring it up to good? And that might include, for example, the way that people have worked during COVID and other things. And what are we going to do when we do look at the improvement plan? Are we going to have the backing that we need from the executive team to put things right if they require cash or effort?
Okay, perhaps if Adam and I between us respond. This is not a like for like with the 2019 inspection. So what I would draw to your attention is there was actually a new judgment area, the experience and progress of care leavers, which hitherto was part of a broad judgment area around children in care and care leavers. That new judgment came in January this year. I sit on the Ofsted, I represent the Southeast region on the Ofsted consultative forum. And what's been very clear in the inspections that Ofsted have undertaken since January, there has been a very forensic look, quite rightly so, at the experience that care leavers have. So I do think we're not comparing like with like, the inspection that we've had in March with the 2019 inspection. And quite rightly, you've referenced some of the very great challenges of the last few years. The COVID pandemic, the challenges that we have in terms of workforce, recruitment, retention, market forces, all of those things have played out, and it's a challenging context in which we work. Now we're very realistic and grounded. I suppose the other thing I would say is the grade of requires improvement is a very vast grade, ranging from very near inadequate right through to being on the cusp of good. And it was I think it's notable from the language in the report and the conversations that we had with inspectors throughout the 3-week period, that there has been significant movement towards the upper end of requires improvement. And what has to be demonstrated is that sustainability of, a sustained good approach throughout all of the judgment areas to get to that overall good. So I'll see if Adam wants to come in and build on any of that. Adam, happy to.
I think you covered the part I was going to say about the broad nature of requires improvement and understanding maybe where you were at the beginning, the improvements and changes that have been put in place in terms of services and aspects of the structure during that time. And I would say that the every inspection focuses on different areas, and areas that may have been focused on last time are not reflected this time in terms of areas of improvement. And I think there was an element in the language in the report about the variability in terms of aspects of very good practice, but that ability for that to be consistent throughout in all aspects or all areas. And again, I think the point you make is around this is an unusual time in terms of, we don't talk so much about the pandemic, but it will not be impact free in terms of our services and how we reorganize ourselves or have reorganized ourselves post that.
Bill?
Yeah, I accept that, and most importantly, the working practices with regards to where people are located and other things like that. But what I hear from you, which is perhaps not what you meant to say, is that we were perhaps a bit unlucky that they looked at the things we're not so good at and picked them up. And if they'd have looked at some of the other stuff, we would have got a good in maybe some of these categories. Is that me being unfair, or have I heard you right?
I wouldn't say that directly, but I don't think what you're saying is probably inaccurate in some ways. I think the point before I disappeared offline earlier, the point I was making, I'm not sure Helen picked it up, is that we are a very small authority and we have the same number of inspectors as a large authority. And I feel that when with the list we were having or putting up showed the broad range of workers, practically all our workers they met with and discussed cases with and services with. And when I was talking about variability, it's the ensuring that the very positive work that we're doing and the timeliness and so forth is reflected across the piece rather than in a percentage of it or a percentage of the work rather than them potentially looking at areas that we may not have wanted them to look at. I think we have to be confident for any inspection that anywhere they go that we understand it, we can confidently talk to it, or we can indicate what our plan is that we already know about it. That part I was saying earlier, what they're looking at is how well you know yourselves. And I think what became very apparent in this inspection was that when they were talking about children, and they weren't using names because they didn't have the names, but we knew exactly which children, a leadership team, myself and Helen and others, which children they were talking about, because we know these children, we know these situations.
Can I just... Sorry? Oh, okay. Yep. I'd just like to pick up on one of your questions, Phil, because, and I'd like to take a slightly different tack, because you said, were there any findings that were a surprise? I'd like to take a slightly different tack, building on something that Adam's just said about how well do we know ourselves? And so my question is, are there any areas of the report and all the discussions and so forth that you had with Ofsted that you feel that you still perhaps don't fully understand, or do you really feel, that you understand everything, that Ofsted has said? I'm sorry if that's a bit of an unfair question, but I think it's an important question. Yeah.
I'm a layperson in this, but there's something that I couldn't get my head around in it. And that was how there was one team where they praised how the staff could take the initiative, how their judgment and decision making was excellent, but they criticised that team because the managers didn't intervene enough in it and supervise them sufficiently. So you wonder how both those things can be the case. So that there are those kinds of, and I do think there is clear evidence, if you read the report, of progress. So it's not as bad. It's very hard for the staff when they have put so much effort in and made such changes since 2019, gone through COVID and all the rest of it, to be facing the situation where there are things. And I know Helen made a lot of challenges to the draft report and got a lot of them accepted, but we couldn't quite get over the line on care leavers. We were very, very close to a good and just couldn't. There was one small thing that just stopped it happening. So progress has been made. I'm confident that they know what they need to do. And that, to answer, I think, one of your questions, are they backed by the executive? Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that Ofsted found that we wouldn't have recognised as something that we knew about. We might have wished that they didn't quite take the same view of some of it, but there were absolutely, there was nothing, I think, that people weren't, when they raised it, they didn't know about. Yeah.
I think that the point, Andrew, is I suppose we can look at our glass half full or is it half empty, and I think people can view things very differently. And I think the point that Helen made at the beginning was it is a deficit model. It does appear to be experienced as a deficit model in terms of the approach. And I feel that in Wokingham we have good staff, dedicated staff who focus on building relationships with children, making changes, supporting families, which is the priority of what we want the work to do. They have a clear practice model that informs what they do. And their approach, we upset families, we please families. It's the nature of children's social care and services. We you know, by the nature of what we do, it does cause some difficulties and challenges. How we record that and reflect that is key. How we articulate that and talk to that is key and important. So I think I feel, and I would say this, wouldn't I? But I do feel that, you know, requires improvement is broad, and I feel we are. You know, the question was, you know, did they look in the wrong place? I don't think I'd say that. I think if they came at a different time, would it make a difference, or a different, in the time we're in this year, if it had come last year, would it have made a difference? So there's all these different variable factors that we have, and the challenges with, we face, that the contextual as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adam. I'm very aware, Sarah, that that it's more difficult sort of participating online. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask, Sarah?
No, the questions I was going to ask have already been covered. Thank you, though. That's
great. Any further questions, Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to briefly ask, because I think you were saying the improvement plan will sort of go to Ofsted, I think, late August, wasn't you saying? But do Ofsted offer any sort of support with the improvement plan?
No.
I suspected the answer would be no, but
categorically not. They
is it just
they would
sort of
say
checking
they're
off
not there for improvement purposes. So in effect, I suppose what we're assuring Ofsted about is the fact that we've taken the recommendations and we are actioning appropriate. We have an action plan that will address some of those areas. And of course, they will be testing that out, because we will get a call, again, an announced call. Literally one day we will get a phone call, and it will be, hello, it's Ofsted. We're coming to do a focused visit. It will be on a theme that we do not know. And they will literally, again, it will be over. They'll ring us one week and they'll arrive the following week for a few days. It's a shorter inspection. It's not a judgment inspection, but it would result in a narrative letter, again, with areas of strength, areas for further improvement. So I suppose it's part of that ongoing monitoring that Ofsted undertake through arriving for future inspections, but also through the annual engagement meeting. And we will be ensuring that our self-evaluation, we do that once a year, that will reflect very precisely where the improvements have got to, because that's what Ofsted test out when they come. Very much how much we understand ourselves. Adam, do come in.
Just to add that as well, the point that Helen made there is that our improvement activity doesn't just focus on the areas that Ofsted identify. We have a broad improvement plan that covers much more broader areas and is very dynamic. We, as I said, it's about how you know yourselves, areas we identify, areas of improvement, practice improvement, service improvement. So those areas will be focused within that improvement plan, but it won't stop when we've addressed those. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, the issue of self-evaluation has come up a number of times. Am I correct in believing that there are times when there's a peer review process involved in some such evaluation?
Sure, just responding. We've done a number of peer reviews over the last year and a half. We've already referenced the virtual school peer challenge. We also had colleagues from Hampshire and other local authorities in the southeast do a peer challenge of our care leaving services. We invite challenge. We undertake audits of our cases. Many of those are thematic because that's the lens through which we challenge ourselves.
That's excellent. Prue?
So I just want to make one more point, because there's been a lot in the news lately following Ruth Perry's tragic death about the impact of Ofsted inspections on schools and that single word judgment. There hasn't been much in the media about the impact of those single word judgments on councils and council staff. And if you bear in mind that an Ofsted inspection in a school is a few days, and then you have the period of silence where you can't say anything, and then it comes back. That is the same in a local authority, but it's 3 weeks. And then there's a small team of people who know what the outcome is, and they can't tell anybody. And it's that single word judgment. And nobody seems to have picked up that actually it's just as bad if you're a member of staff in a local authority and you have been trying to do your best by children, and you get a judgment like that. It really does affect staff morale and staff ability to and disappointment and all those human arrangements, but also where they feel that perhaps they've seen some of the less good performance and not seen all the good performance, and those and it's very hard to be judged with just those few words at the end. So I would urge you to read the whole report and to read the positives as well as the negatives, that the progress is being made, and that our staff are working hard for children. And I think the very positive thing, which in fact neither Adam nor Helen said, was they didn't pick up anything where I forgot what the terminology is. There were no safeguarding risks, and the children were safe. And they didn't pick up on any cases that they need to refer back and say, "Oi, this is
thank you. Thank you very much for that, Prue. It's very, very important. And I'd also like it to be noted that we have seen evidence of the kinds of support that staff gave one another, throughout this process, a very difficult and challenging process. And that support, is very, very much appreciated, as well. Anne?
I just wondered, are there external factors beyond the council's control which actually contribute to the requiring improvement?
Well, I suppose I've referenced workforce challenges. Because we get no advance warning. We never know when the call is coming. We did have some periods of sickness in the workforce in the few months prior to Ofsted calling in March, and that played out a little in the issue of timeliness, for example. So I think Adam referred to, if we'd been inspected at a different point in time, could the outcome have been different? I suppose the challenge is you have to go with when the call comes, and you have to do the absolute best that you can. We work in a system, don't we? So we work in a system with health colleagues and education and other colleagues, and the police and others. So sometimes the system, there can be factors in the wider system that can be challenging, such as waiting lists for health provision, for example. So I think all of that plays out. It's a complex question that you've asked, and I'd like to reflect more, but that's my initial response. Thank you.
Just Adam, to add to that, I was just thinking back about the focus we had last year, and it landed on Easter holidays. We had a large chunk of staff off. I was on a beach on the southeast coast, and so you just have to deal with it at that time, and you have staff away, vacancy gaps in staff, so it can be very random about obviously when it comes, because you get no notice. It's just there and they arrive. And we did challenge back on that in terms of the timing. I think it was the first holiday post-COVID lockdowns, and lots of staff decided to take advantage of the ability to travel with their children.
It's a really important question, a useful question, Anne, and I think that we must revisit it when we look at the improvement plan in September. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of times you referred to the fact that we at the same time, team come and look at us as a small borough, as effectively, I guess, goes and looks at a large county council. That's exceedingly unfair. We're getting much more scrutiny than a large county council would have. They're not treating us fairly. They're not comparing us in the same way either. Now, I don't think it's worthwhile taking that up with us said. You can put as snotty a letter as you like back to them. They don't seem to care about anything. Is there anywhere else we can actually say to government or something and say, it's just not right?
Thank you. In response to that, I did raise that very specific point with the quality assurance manager who was on site for 2 days within the inspection period. And the answer to that is very few local authorities. You're talking tiny local authorities, such as Rutland, such as the City of London, that we know where there might be, a handful of cases, children's cases. They would be the ones where there would be a slightly smaller team. But I did challenge on that point and sadly got nowhere. Thank you.
I think the other point, just to add to that, Helen, is also as an authority that requires improvement, you also have a 3-week inspection, whereas authorities that are good have a much less a 2-week inspection. So it's also the increased time frame as well.
Thanks for that, Ian. I think that's a really interesting point, and I'm going to suggest a recommendation on that. Yeah,
pick up on what Adam said there, but it goes around the circle though, because that just means that because we get the 3-week review and they therefore have much greater chance of finding stuff, we don't get to that next level to be able to then reduce to a 2-week review. We're always stuck somewhere at the bottom.
There could well be a significant issue there, and I would like to make a recommendation in relation to that. Phil.
Yeah, as someone who experiences them quite too many times CQC inspections rather than Ofsted, I don't come here without sympathy and empathy. So don't think that I do. So the question I have is with regards to your improvement plan. Looking forward to seeing that. Can you just give a flavour, a very brief flavour of just how much team involvement from bottom up there is in developing some of those improvements? Because actually, as often the key actors, they're the people with the best ideas.
Adam, I don't know if you want to answer that, and I'll build.
As I mentioned earlier, we've often got improvement plans or activity running, not just ones focused on Ofsted in terms of areas we're doing, and often that the creation of that activity or the development of that activity involves our team managers in terms of those that are directly managing the practice on the front line, because we need them on board. Any improvement journey, as I think you're implying, as we know, is only as good as the ability to implement it by the workers that are delivering that face-to-face service. I think we mentioned earlier, we're only as good as our workers and practitioners are out there delivering it, so they need to be on board. So we do involve and we do share that information. It's that we avoid the sort of top-down simplistic approaches around improvement. We try and deconstruct why things need to change and what resources or services we need to put in place to make that work.
Yeah, I think again, Phil, that's a very important point, and it's something which I'm sure we will come back to when we look at the improvement plan in September. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'd like to make a small number of recommendations. The first recommendation is that this committee notes the ILACS report. The second recommendation is that this committee extends its thanks to all of the children's services staff and any others, because there may well have been other departments involved as well, who participated in the ILACS inspection and also in the development of the improvement plan. And I would hope that this could then be communicated, if this is agreed, it's communicated formally to all those staff in an appropriate way. I would like to recommend, picking up on Ian's point, that we look to some sort of appropriate wording that would enable us to lobby on lobby the appropriate persons, organisations on the very specific matter of the very small size of the local authority and the implications of that in the ILACS inspection. Now, obviously, the wording is going to be quite difficult. And so what I would like to propose with the committee's agreement is that we, the chair, myself, and the director of Children's Services, propose some wording outside of this meeting, which is then circulated to all the members for their consideration. And then if there's agreement, that is used in this lobbying manner. I'm not sure if I'm being clear enough with that. So we can't get the wording tonight. Okay, but I think that we could come up with wording outside of the meeting, which would then be circulated for approval or amendment by all the committee members. And I've noted that the improvement plan will be considered at the 6th of September meeting. I would also like to suggest a final recommendation that an update of the improvement plan, including measures of progress, be brought to the 6th of January committee meeting as well. I think there's sufficient time between those two meetings, for some meaningful reporting, to take place. So again, there are 4 recommendations there. I would like to propose the recommendations. A seconder, Phil? No, sorry.
No, I'm not seconding, Andrew. I wonder if we can take them separately, because I'm not entirely convinced on the lobbying.
Certainly,
element.
yeah.
So, and I can I just explain why, please? I would love to vote for that, but I'd love to vote for that after we've completed this process. I think that right now it's not perhaps the right time to do that.
I was just thinking too.
Are members of the committee happy with Phil's suggestion? Yeah, and that will give us ample time, to reflect and get the wording, should we choose, right, and the communication methods of communication, right. Yeah, I think there's general agreement. So thank you very much for that suggestion, Phil. Excellent. Okay, so the remaining 3 recommendations. Okay, seconder. The other 3 recommendations, Phil. Okay, all of those in favour? Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 13, the safety valve and send updates. Okay, and that is Jonathan and Ming. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan, Chair. Jonathan will go through, will give you very, very brief, conscious of the time, update on safety valves.
Yeah, I've got some slides to run through, but I'm very conscious of the time, so I will share them, but I'll zip through them and take questions if there are any.
Can I just ask members of the committee, because again we are all conscious of the time. I think everybody has read the report and seen the slides. Okay, is there anybody who would like? Is there anybody who would like to, Jonathan, to go through them again?
It's a verbal report, Andrew, so there's nothing been circulated on this one, has it? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, were they right? Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Lucia circulated them.
That's good.
Okay, is everybody happy to go straight to questions then? Okay, well, the slides were circulated. If you would like.
I mean, I haven't got any material to look at the moment, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so you're saying you would like to go through the slides?
Yes, I think so, or a summary of them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. If we could just do it in summary, though, Précis summary.
I'll do that as best I can. Just a moment. Can everyone see those okay? Have they appeared?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So what I wanted to cover was the safety valve progress update, an update on the free schools, an update on the capital bid, which I mentioned last time I was here, the strategy refresh, and then the program delivery. But I'll skip through some of that. So with safety valve, as you'll be aware of the program, I won't dwell on that. There are 15 active projects under 4 different work streams. The ones I perhaps wanted to focus on for this would have been obviously the really good news in terms of new provision. I'm wanting to relate this back to the conversation earlier with those really impressive young people. We are all too aware of the need for better early intervention and early identification of need, and that forms one of the major strands of this. And the other thing we're aware of is very conscious of some of those gaps in our provision, which was why I've set about filling some of those gaps through the new special schools, and as well as looking at a new post-16 provision that we'll be moving on with, as I'll cover in a moment. This is just to give you a quick program overview, really just to share. I mean, I don't know if we've got time to go into it now. I can talk to some of those individual strands or individual project areas. Your eyes will be drawn to some of the red ratings. I can certainly take questions on those if that's of interest, but I don't think I'll get into that now unless there's questions on it. I think it's probably the best way to go. There are certain key risks. One of the things we're about to embark on is next week we'll launch a consultation with our partners in schools, because one of the key components of the safety valve is we need to secure agreement from our schools forum to transfer a proportion of the schools block over to our high needs block. This is fairly commonplace in many other authority areas. What's slightly unusual is we're having to request a 1% transfer. 0.5% is far more customary. We're seeking a 1% transfer. It's rated red because we are all too aware, as the schools, our partners in schools, are telling us of the financial pressures they themselves are under, and it's no easy thing to persuade a school to surrender that 1% of the schools block. We are getting positive signs from our schools, and schools are very much on side with our proposals and the direction of travel. But we have to acknowledge that still for them to agree to transfer that money across may be a hard sell. So we'll be able to report back in due course as to how successful we've been in persuading them. The other one that's red there is around partnership buying. We've had a lot of debate with our health colleagues, particularly in terms of ensuring we've got that health engagement in this agenda. I think the next time we look at this, that red rating probably will have been downgraded. We have made some really good progress with health partners, and we've just reformulated our partnership board with the full support and buy-in from our health colleagues. And I think, as I say, we feel we've moved on some way with that level of commitment. Moving on ever so slightly, we have just on Friday submitted our first safety valve report back to the DfE. Broadly positive. I mean, at this stage, still some financial challenges there, and no question. And obviously, the financial impact of all this work is not yet being felt. We're still seeing major spikes in demand for services. But broadly speaking, most of the projects are on course. All the key projects are on course to deliver. And we feel we submitted a moderately positive report on what will undoubtedly be is a very challenging programme. Free school development. There's not a huge amount to say here, other than that this will go to an executive meeting on the 29th of June to finalise the location of both special free schools. A significant amount of effort went into an options appraisal of 4 potential sites, and that now I think has been resolved, but that has to go to executive, so I won't rehearse the arguments that will be presented at executive at the end of June. I think we've now met with 5 academy trusts, so there's already a good level of interest in operating these schools. We're kind of courting interest with the market. We don't think we're going to have any difficulty in having a good range of applications, including some very local providers who are interested or expressing an interest even now in operating those 2 schools. So we think that's progressing well, and into working well with our colleagues in the capital team and the property team for aiming for an opening date in 2026. That's an ambitious target date, but it is achievable. The high needs capital bid. We had come to the conclusion, we'd submitted a bid for £6.3 million worth of additional funding from the DfE. We had come to the conclusion we hadn't been successful because we should have heard, we thought, by the end of March. Towards the end of May, we finally had the announcement that came through. We had actually been successful. So we secured an additional 6.3 million. That's in addition to what was an allocation of £3 million we already had in our high needs capital block. That will enable us to move forward with that investment in resource bases and SEND units attached to mainstream schools, as well as in that element of post-16 provision. We're currently conducting an options appraisal and a needs analysis around post-16 to inform a specification that will go out in due course. The strategy refresh, simply to say, I think this is more or less, as I said last time, we are currently towards the tail end of the existing SEND strategy, but obviously the world has shifted. Many things have happened. So we are embarking on a good piece of co-production work with our colleagues in SEND Voices, and also with the youth. We will be working closely with our colleagues in the Youth Forum, as some of those you met earlier, to ensure we've captured young people's ambitions and priorities going forward, as well as the parent care of the parent care community. This has to be overlaid with the priorities that we have identified for ourselves as a result of Safety Valve. But we recognise Safety Valve is not the be-all and end-all in terms of the SEND agenda, and there are other areas, including the autism strategy, including short breaks and so on. So we want to ensure the strategy captures the whole picture. There'll be some active consultation going on in the next few months over the summer, and that will inform the drafting of that document, ready for sort of early consultation in the autumn. But that's still at a relatively early stage, I'd say. But it's on the rails. It's moving. I don't know that the governance is of particular interest. There's a lot of work being done on the governance. We've got a slight duality in terms of the partnership board, which looks at the wider agenda, system leadership, those areas that are not Safety Valve related, and the strict program governance around Safety Valve, which sits on the left-hand side of that, which is much more the council has signed up to that Safety Valve agreement with the DfE, so that has a slightly not a different governance route, but there's a level of scrutiny that happens at the Safety Valve programme board meetings. I don't imagine this is particularly the most interesting thing. I would think I will finish there because I realise we probably want to take some questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen. I hope that wasn't too much of a whistle-stop tour, but I thought I'd better go at some speed.
No, that was really helpful, Jonathan. Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask Sarah first if you have any questions on any matters, including the SEND strategy refresh. Do you have any questions or comments, for example, about the process, including any concerns or any aspects?
On the SEND strategy, we are working really closely with Wokium around co-producing it. That's yet to form shape yet. We're still working on that and how we're going to best do that. So that's really good. I guess my biggest concern to raise is around the resource bases. Evening, Jonathan, by the way.
Evening.
And sorry, I've not got my camera on today. But the resource bases are, I think, as our families are most concerned about, and the changes that are coming to those, because at the moment we've already decommissioned the other ones, and Westcott and the West End are, places are slowly eking out, but we haven't got the new places coming in when we were expecting them to, and how we're going to manage that shortfall.
And that is one of our reg-rated red. We are, very acutely aware of that risk. I would say we haven't at this stage formally decommissioned anything. No places have been withdrawn at this stage. The intention was to phase out some of the less well-used provision whilst replacing it with something slightly more close to matching our needs. We recognise that risk you've identified. We are in dialogue with the current providers to perhaps refresh that, revisit that conversation about whether they had not expressed an interest. We kind of hoped they would and expected they might. They didn't do so, but it would certainly take quite a few steps out of the pathway if we could work with our existing providers to refresh their offer rather than starting from scratch. But we also believe that there's a level of confidence. We're really beginning to build those partnerships with schools. I think we're winning them over in terms of the future and the vision of where we're trying to get to. And I really believe we'll begin to see more interest expressed from schools in the coming months. But yeah, I mean, I'll acknowledge it. We were disappointed we didn't get those. We didn't have those inquiries from schools. Those that did come forward were unable to progress at the pace we needed to for this year. We do think we'll have some. We're expecting to be able to make progress for the September 24 launch of new provision. But yes, there is still some ground to cover, and we certainly are not sleeping at the wheel on that one.
Thank you, Jonathan. And could I just, ask one last question, if I may, around the governance? You sort of went over the fact that you did talk about the SEND partnership has a different governance structure and the one that you just presented. Could you explain to me why they're different again?
They shouldn't. They don't. Well,
it's not the one we looked at recently. You weren't in that meeting. I'm going to say sorry, Jonathan. I can see Ming's got his hand up because you weren't in that meeting.
I'll acknowledge one thing. I drew up this presentation prior to before you'd had the meeting to finalise the governance. So
that explains it then. Thank you.
I suspect I may have shared a slide that is now out of date, and for that I apologise. But that was my mistake, and I should have perhaps swapped it out before. But the thing is, the papers went out before you'd had that meeting, so I'm afraid there is a slight revision to that, as you highlighted.
That does explain it. Thank you, Jonathan.
We'll come to you in a minute, Ming. Do you have any concerns about the governance then, Sarah? Is that what you're saying?
No, the concern was we spent a lot of time co-producing that, and I think we came to a really nice agreement and compromise on the structures and how the meetings should go. So I just wanted to clarify why I've gone back to an old slide. That was all.
Thank you, Ming.
Yeah, thank Chair. That's exactly the reassurance I would want to give to Sarah. The result exactly that what we came up with, Sarah. I think the probably Jonathan presented a slightly different way, but I can give you reassurance. What we have concluded, the final version going to be put out to broader partnership when we next meet.
That's lovely. Thank you, Ming.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Ming. I too had some concerns about the resource bases. I mean, clearly there have been some challenges in attracting schools to open more resource bases, but you sound confident, that you will be able to achieve that. Okay, is there any target number for resource bases?
Yes, we would hope to be. By 2027, according to our intended trajectory, we'd have 100 more resource-based places spread across. It will depend on the site. It will depend on the sites that we have available, but certainly 100 places is the target figure for 2027, and that will be spread across secondary and primary.
Thank you. Any further member questions? Okay. Well, if we can firstly thank all the officers for their presentations, and if we can note those presentations, thank you very much indeed. So, agenda item 14, executive member update. Prue.
It's going to be very short because the papers you've had already and the one we're going to have about schools sufficiently cover absolutely everything that I could possibly want to say. So I'm very happy to be asked any questions about anything, but I think all the major issues are covered in the items on the agenda.
Are there any questions that people would like to ask of Prue? In particular, any matters that have not been covered or will not be covered in this agenda? No? Well, thank you for your participation, Prue. Agenda item 15, school sufficiency update. Is that Ming and Piers?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly. Pierre has prepared very, very comprehensive, very detailed report for this committee. So I will suggest Pierre to give very, very brief heads up of what the report about. Wouldn't take more than 3 minutes or something like that, so we can leave more time for the member to ask questions. Yes.
Thank you, Ming. Thank you, Chair. I shall endeavour to be as quick as I possibly can. I just wish to highlight that there are a number of factors that sit behind all phases that are having a significant impact on our schools at the moment. So first one I would say is the number of births in the borough. That's declined since 2012 with an uptick last year, but it was a steady rate of decline. 2012 is basically the cohort of children who are now entering secondary school. Second thing is international migration. You're probably aware that this has changed dramatically nationally. Well, the same thing has happened in Wokingham. We've had a dramatic increase in the number of families coming into the borough in both 2021 and 2022. And so far, it looks that that's continuing at least into 2023. Critical issue is how long will that remain in place? And the resource constraints that the council has. I think I just wish to highlight that because that makes the job of managing those additional needs doubly difficult. On the primary side, because of the low birth rate, our big issue certainly in the infants key stage 1 size is too many school places, and we're working with schools in a number of parts of the borough to reduce their capacity. Despite that, and because of the strong rate of migration into the borough, we did open the St Cecilia's School in the Embrook ward to serve to meet the needs of the rising Key Stage 2 children. I would just highlight Shinfield very briefly as an area that goes against the grain. It is an area where numbers are rising. Secondary numbers are rising. The critical issue here is going to be how long the international migration maintains. We have a strategy agreed in 2022. Are we going to need additional places on top of that? It's very much dependent on what the rate of international migration is. We have a gold place planning process in play at the moment, led by the Council's Chief Executive, with an attempt to bring the provision of the additional places, the cost of doing so, back down in line with the council's actual resources. And that's a critically important process for us all. And post 16, I will give very briefly say we're still working with the Bowhunt School to create their sixth form. There's no real immediate risk of having too few post 16 places, or 60 sixth form places at least in the borough, but there is a risk because we are rather reliant for some areas and some schools on out of borough provision. Of course, we've got no control over whether our students would continue to have access. And the SEND provision notes that I've written, I will not share with you on the basis that Jonathan has very ably walked you through that area. Now I'm open for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Piers, for that very informative report, and which clearly elaborates just the complexity of the challenge. Can we go straight to any members' questions? Andrew?
Yeah, my first one was related to the sort of Shinfield area that you were talking about. On page 68, it's talking about the with the, I think, Section 106 agreement with the school in Spencer's Wood, which couldn't go ahead because of the Burfield sort of emergency planning zone. My sort of question was, I'm sort of surprised that sort of didn't come up at some point during the sort of planning process, with that a school might not be appropriate there. But more going forward is, it sort of suggests in the report that money can't be used elsewhere. I mean, what's the situation with that in terms of whether that money could be used for either a new school outside of that zone or for expansion of schools outside the specific development area?
The original planning consent was awarded many years ago, and we're still governed by the agreements and the Section 106 agreements that were signed off at that point. Unfortunately, Section 106 agreements are all unique. In this case, we were lumbered with one. It's what the developer offered us, and it was difficult to move away, to make a strong argument against it, because there was no reason to think we wouldn't be able to build the school or wouldn't want to build the school at any point. And the monies that the developers offered us are very specifically tied to a school on the Spencer's Wood site, which just happens to be in the DEPZ, which nobody was aware of at the time. So we are likely to enter into negotiations with the developer to extend the range, so to change the clauses basically in the Section 106 agreement. But the advice I've got at the moment is that that's very much dependent on the agreement of the developer, and of course that there is a risk that won't be forthcoming.
Further question, Andrew?
Yeah, and I guess my question is, if that does fall through, then the developer doesn't agree to sort of be a bit more flexible with that, where does it go from there? Does the council have to sort of cough up money for that, or what would be the backup there for school places?
Well, that would be the discussion that has to be held about the balance of the needs in that local area, opposed to the cost, as it were, of finding the capital. But that's a discussion that needs to be had. But I think it'll be had in the context of whether we've been successful in transferring the money into a general pot, as it were. Our resources are very tightly constrained at the moment, and we do have plentiful supply of surplus of primary school places in adjoining areas.
And do you know when the developer might get back to you with those sort of things? Do you know what sort of timescale of that is?
Well, I'm certainly hoping that they will resolve this over the course probably of into the autumn this year. I certainly wouldn't expect to get any definitive answers over the summer. So I would say early autumn, but I wouldn't be more precise than that, I'm afraid.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those questions, Andrew. Any other questions? I do have one final question, well, maybe the final question. On page 69, there's a reference to the creative ways being considered to tackle the matter of insufficient places for Wokingham pupils at Edgebarrow School. I'm just wondering what some of these creative ways are and how serious potentially a matter this could be if we're not able to continue to secure those places.
Well, the creative ways would be see if there's provision off site that we could within our borough that we could fund and that Edgebarrow could staff, but with our funding because it's in our borough. I have to say that I've been, since that was drafted, the report was drafted, and we had the initial discussions with parties, including the DFE's finance team. I think that there might be a potential opening in the way in which the law is worded, rather than the way that the DFE have chosen to word their finance guidance, that may give us an in to challenge the advice that we receive from the DFE, which would enable us to spend our growth fund monies, or some of our growth fund monies, on supporting Edgebarrow School to take on additional students. We are not the only borough in this position where we are reliant upon provision in another borough.
Thank you for that. Prue?
Before Ming comes in on that one of the difficulties with this is that there are more students than just our students in Woking Without who couldn't get into Edgebarrow. So even if Edgebarrow expands, with the current situation, there's no guarantee that any of our Woking Without children will get in ahead of some of the Bracknell Forest children who live near the school. So this is a very delicate dance, but I think that's why it says we're looking at creative way. We're looking to see what we can do that would actually help our children. Bracknell have a different situation to us in their secondary school places, in that they've got a surplus. So they're not particularly interested themselves in expanding the school because they've got other places they can send their children, although they choose to go to Edgebarrow, and therefore there's a waiting list for Edgebarrow, and our children are not necessarily at the top of that list. So it's all about parental preference as well as school places generally.
Thank you, Prue. And Ming?
Thank you, Chair. Very much what Prue said. When we said that we're exploring creative way, it's not just about money size, it's about the whole working on school system, how we can support that solution. I have to say that we are exploring. We still have not come up with some tangible idea yet, but we're exploring. But we're confident through our experience, we can always come up with something positive. We can report back. But another thing on Growth Fund, Pierre just mentioned, that's for people, I think, who for the school who expand the places, we guarantee to fill the gap of place funding, per place funding. However, when school expands, that 15 places, 30 places, the law does not allow them just give less people who working on applicants. Yeah, the current legislation. So as you can see, that it's not the way like old days assisted places for private school. You pay locally, pay for them to go to a school. We're not allowed to do that. So let conversation should continue. But what I'm saying in the chair, I think we said we're exploring, but we cannot really give you what exactly the idea are. But we are exploring actively. That's very important to us.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. That's clear. It's clearly a very, very challenging situation. And I think I understood from peers that there may be some greater clarity on at least some of these issues in the autumn and beyond. So we'll continue to monitor this. Are there any further questions? Andrew?
Sorry, could I just quickly ask? 'Cause I just had a query about the on page 76, the table with school places, which shows the year 7 intake places decreasing up and then stabilising in 26, 27. Is that because secondary schools are offering temporary increases to their PANs and which are decreasing, or is there a different reason for those that did decreasing?
Sorry, which page was that?
76, I think it's on one of the appendix.
76. Gosh, let me just pan down to 76. Right. Sorry, is that the year 7 table you're looking at?
Yeah, the year 7 table,
Yes, no, that's really because that's basically a snapshot of time in a process that we're engaged in at the moment. So that is assuming that well, there are a number of schools that we're working with to create the capacity that we think we'll need up until 2030, 31. At this point, I don't think I was confident enough that we had achieved that yet to put those places into the table. I think from what I gather from conversations that have been happening through the gold process, there are more places that could go into that table now. But I certainly didn't wish to be overly optimistic about the supply of places.
Yeah, just to add, that is an evolving situation. We are working to, number one, to make our forecasting as accurate as possible. As members understand that we use very traditional, nationally applied model to forecast future place need. That's kind of not fully applicable to working on, because we have unusual number of migration into the Borough in past 2 years. So we need to gather a lot of intelligence, and the goal that Pierre referred to is our senior chief executive can look into it to make sure we have a new model to forecast future. Also, we gather intelligence from school leader. We've been talking to the school leader to see what they feel that the need is going to be. And I think the key factor is birth rates. Although we do have a migration in that affect our figure, but birth rate drop that will affect the number after 2029, 2030 academic year. That is one of the key factor as well.
Thank you. Any further questions, Andrew, or any other members? No? Okay, well, we do have one recommendation on page 65, and that is that the report and attached paper are noted. Does anybody have any other recommendations? If not, can we vote to note this report? Okay, I propose that. Seconder, Andrew. Okay, all those in favour of noting the report, thank you. Okay, and thank you, Piers and Ming. Okay, agenda item 16, the schools update. Gillian. And welcome, Gillian. Again, the same plea that I've made to most of the speakers tonight. Okay, we have all read the report, and thank you very much indeed, for what are always comprehensive reports. If there's anything you particularly wish to highlight or any particular context you'd like to stress, otherwise we can go straight to any questions.
I think just two things to highlight, Chair, which is firstly the success of those 8 schools securing good, and in particular those who've secured outstanding, which is absolutely by no mean feat. So that is an absolute something that I would like to celebrate this evening. And then to share with you some additional information in relation to Ofsted inspections that has emerged in the last 10 days. So following the tragic death of a local head teacher, Ruth Perry, in Reading, Ofsted and the government have been reviewing processes. And so last week, some announcements were made in terms of some alterations to the process around the current inspection framework. And I just thought it might be helpful to give you a quick heads up on what they look like, because they take immediate effect. So as a result, The inspection framework itself and the documentation has not changed, but what HMCI has asked inspectors to do is to operate slightly differently within the realms of that framework. So there will be a faster re-inspection process for schools who have identified safeguarding issues. So that means that if a school is judged to be good or better for the 4 judgment areas, leadership and management, quality of teaching and learning, pupil behaviour and attendance, and personal development and well-being, but has a significant issue around safeguarding, inspectors will return within a 3-month period to review whether or not those safeguarding issues have been addressed, and then overturn what would have been an inadequate grade and reissue a report with a good or a better grade potentially. As a result of that, had a school received an inadequate judgment, the Secretary of State might have got into the process of issuing an academy order, and the consequence would be that that academy order would be revoked. There's going to be some greater clarity around safeguarding for schools and what the safeguarding expectations are. And we've been told that there will be an update to the inspection framework in relation to that from September. There has also been launched, as of last week, a consultation on the complaints process that schools can engage with. Currently, it's been only an in-house complaints process with Ofsted, and the consultation takes through some suggestions around using external complaints process and adding additional complaints or check-in points during the inspection process, so that these would be formal check-in processes with the head teacher during the inspection, which would give the head teacher an opportunity to speak to an inspector outside of the inspection process, so not an inspector who's actually part of the team. And the final piece is that schools are going to be told which year they may be inspected in. And having spent the last few days revising that information that's come out and trying to work out for our schools where their window might be, I'd have to say that it's not as clear as one might have anticipated it would be from the information. What it actually does is gives you a kind of sell-by date of your current inspection and says that your next inspection will be before that sell-by date. So it gives you the longest duration of time by which you will receive your next inspection, which can give you an indicator potentially of the year of which your inspection would be. So, Chair, those were just the changes and additions I wanted to draw colleagues' attentions to.
Thank you very much, Gillian. That's extremely useful. I think you stated that these changes have they're to be implemented with immediate effect, and I'm sure that this will be very widely welcomed indeed. I'd just like to reiterate the point that you said about the number of very positive Ofsted reports in this school update. I also note that there are 7 schools currently graded outstanding that are due for inspection, and the very comprehensive support outlined on page 84 that the borough continues to provide to those schools. And finally, to note the discussion relating to the SIAMS inspections. That's also very important and very useful. Are there any questions at all from any members? If not, would somebody like to propose that we note that report?
I've got my hand up, please.
Sorry, Sarah. Sorry, Sarah.
I know I'm hard to see when I'm on the screen. Evening, Gillian. Thank you for that. I just wanted to also say that there is a Ofsted call for evidence for parents as well around the inspection process that's also out to add to that. And I just also wondered, I mean, we're very lucky that we've got such good results coming through in Wokingham, but lots of us children, as we were talking about, are outside of the borough, and not all of those schools are as lucky to get outstanding, and some are going into requires improvement. And I do understand that Wokingham don't have control over those schools, but is there anything that Wokingham can do to reassure those families that do have children in those schools outside of the borough, to just reassure them that you're working with them, or that, you know, things will improve, etc., so you don't have lots of families trying to move their children, because that could also be a bit of an issue around placements?
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for the question. I think that's one of the things that the SEND team look at in their placement of children, and Ofsted inspection grades are one of the things that they do take into account. And certainly you've heard talk of the virtual school this evening as well, and that's one of the things that our colleagues in the virtual school discuss when they're looking at that placement and the provision for the children in those schools beyond the borough as well.
Sarah, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, Prue?
I would say it's more than
sorry,
just Sarah. Pupils, though. Unfortunately, I do think there's quite a few, because the borough's quite small in certain areas. There's quite an overlap. So for those children that aren't SEND, is there a process for those as well?
Sorry, Sarah, I missed the first part of that.
So if a school requires improvement in their latest Ofsted inspection, which was outside of our borough, but we have a cohort of children attending that particular school, there are parents that are starting, SEND and non-SEND, to get worried about those particular schools. Is there any support out there or information for families that are working with these schools to ensure that their children are, obtaining a good education?
I can see Ming is poised to jump in there.
No, just it's a good question, Sarah. Because your local authority maintains school sitting another authority, the equivalent to Julian's team have a responsibility to make sure they have a high quality education provisions. Their academy, DFVs, they directly responsible. They will be held to account themselves to process. If we have a concern be raised to us by the parent, because this also kind of parental choice. We have legal duty, I just said earlier, to provide local resident school places. But if they choose to attend another authority school, unless they, particularly mainstream school, unless they raise the issue of a particular school, I have to say that it would be difficult for us to intervene in another areas, internally school quality of the provision. So,
Ming, Ming, can I just pick up on the very last thing that you said? Did I hear you correctly saying that there's very little, if anything, that our borough can do to help support education improvement in schools outside of our borough? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But for SCN, call it different. Julian already explained that. For mainstream one, you are right, Chair.
Yeah, well, that begs another question, if I may, and that is there any dialogue, meaningful dialogue, between local authorities on matters such as this?
We do have a network called Cso&S 19, SE19 School Improvement Network. If we have any major concern, we can discuss with our relevant authority outside working on. Yeah, let's a network to answer your question, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah, since you raised this issue, would you like to ask anything more on it?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Prue?
What I wanted to say kind of picks up from where Ming left off. So obviously there are children who go to schools outside the borough, and we do notice what's happening with those schools. So we've talked about Edgeborough with places and whatever. There are other schools, and I'm aware of one. I won't name it because it's a public meeting and I don't want to really draw attention to it, particularly that has had a very bad Ofsted report where we know we have Woking children. I think as well as the Southeast 19 network that we've now getting involved in Berkshire, talking to each other more as local authorities in Berkshire as lead members. So we will discuss that in a more informal way. We can't interfere in anybody else's schools, but we can talk together about what we can do to make sure that everybody's children are safe, and people have concerns about some of our schools. So it's a mutual thing.
That's really helpful, Prue, and it's such an important issue. And thank you, Sarah, for raising it. Okay. Would anyone like to propose that we note the school's update? I propose. Seconder? All those in favour? Thank you. Okay. Item 17, the forward programme. I just wanted to make a statement about this. Clearly, we've got a challenge, of extremely full agendas. And indeed, a couple of recommendations from tonight may add items to the forward programme. Many of the items, it is a live document. It is something that often changes at very short notice. But there are many items in the forward programme that have to be discussed, at certain prescribed times and so forth. So it is a challenge, this issue of very, very full agendas. Please feel free at any time to make suggestions directly to me for any alterations, additions, deletions that you'd like to be considered from the forward programme. I don't propose that we go through the forward programme in any detail now, unless anybody wishes to do so. But please do communicate any thoughts that you have, about the forward programme. It is, you'll see, an outline provided up to March, of 2024. Thank you. Agenda item 18, exclusion. I need to read out a notice about the exclusion of the public. That under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act as amended.